Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend. Caller, what if with another fiction? What if Deku have alternate powers now? Before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. On the first day of her journey at UA, Setsuna Takage was excited. She made it through the test with flying colors, and even heard that she was one out of 4 other students that actually made it through recommendation. Sure, the test was hard, and she was put up against some pretty scary powerful quirks. But she came out on top, so forgive her if she was feeling a little confident. Okay, really confident. She was going to kick ass at UA, and nothing was going to stop her. Sitting at her desk early, she fiddled with some of the stuff in her bag, making sure to say hello to everyone who entered after her. These people were going to be her classmate for years. Might as well start it off well. However, there was one thing she noticed as she introduced herself to each classmate. Her class was full of characters. A woman with vines for hair that recited a Bible verse at her when she introduced herself. Check. A girl with brown bobbed hair covering her face who squeaked when she tried to introduce herself and ran away like a mouse. Check. A kind-looking girl with an orange ponytail who's giving off big senpai vibes. Check. A dude with crazy hair and sharp teeth talking about manly stuff. Check. Hell, there's even a guy with a glue bottle for a head. But the one who caught her interest the most wasn't any of them. When she first walked through the doors to 1B, Setsuna wondered a little why the doors were so massive. She gaped at the intimidating size of it, and wondering aloud if giants lived in these halls. Now she had her answer. Walking into the room shortly after was what Takage could only describe as a mountain of a man. He had to be standing 6'8" at least. He had a bushy patch of green hair on his head that made her think of a big palm tree and cute little freckles dotted in a star pattern over what she dare say were very pinchable cheeks. Looking farther down, she noticed he had massive tree branch-like arms and a broad-barreled chest that fought tightly against his uniform. The face versus body was so jarring. She wasn't sure if she should swoon or swear to protect. She really wanted to know what hugs from him were like. Deciding that she had been staring for too long, she walked over to him to say hello. He was fiddling with something in his bag, muttering a little to himself when she walked over. Standing next to him, she smiled with her hand out only for nothing to happen. He didn't even notice her. Too busy doing something that wasn't talking to her. Frowning, she coughed into her hand, clearing her voice to get his attention. With his massive frame, she expected a lot of things. An angry glare, maybe a confused look, but what she got threw her through a loop. He yelped. He fucking yelped like a startled child, jumping a little in place before turning to look at her with wide eyes. Face red, he stuttered out a few things, staring at her like she was the intimidating one. It was so confusing. She thought she was a good judge of character, but for whatever reason this guy threw her through a loop. She hardly even heard what he said before shaking her head and smiling up at him. Hey there, Green. Name's Takage. G. Green. Yeah, cause of the whole hair sitch. Doing a gesture with her hand to his hair, she smiled more, showing off her sharp teeth. Now are you going to keep a pretty girl waiting all day? Or are you going to introduce yourself? Staring down at her, his face turned bright red, his eyes widening more before giving her a shaky smile. Oh no, he was really cute. Alright, sorry. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya, huh? Nah, you look more like broccoli to me. B. Broccoli. Maybe more like a palm tree. A palm tree. Snapping her fingers, she pointed at him, smiling at the confusion on his face. A bush. Will you stop just naming? Hearing someone clearing his throat, they both turned to see their teacher, Vlad King, standing in the doorway. With a raised eyebrow and a wave of his hand, he gestured to their seats. Please stop flirting and take your seats. Class has started. Looking back at Green, she smirked, giving him a wink before walking back to her seat, giving a little salute to her teacher as she went. I Capitan. When she looked back, she found Green still standing there, his face practically nuclear before shaking his head and scampering over to his desk, his massive frame looking almost comical in his tiny desk. Feeling her smirk spread across her face, she placed her cheek in her palm, watching the gentle giant fidget as he pulled out his stuff. Oh, this was going to be fun. The rest of the day was pretty uneventful. They got their syllabus for the year, what classes were when, and they did orientation. It was a little weird that their sister class wasn't there, but oh whatever, not like it was her business. Listening to the principal talk for way too long about. She lost track at this point. She sighed, closing her eyes and crossing her arms when she heard it. It was faint, but just enough for her to hear. Turning her head a little to see, but not enough to let them know she was listening, she saw two general studies students from behind them whispering and pointing at Green. Taking a half of a step back to listen better, she leaned in. Yo, that's the guy I was talking about. During the practical exam, he ran into the fray to save a girl with brown hair. He lifted the 0-pointer. Tilting her head, she raised an eyebrow, silently repeating the word 0-pointer with her mouth. What's a 0-pointer? Looking back at Green, he didn't seem to notice people were talking about him as he listened to every word the principal was saying. He was staring straight ahead, starry-eyed, and writing into a notebook. Snorting, she shook her head before facing the front again. God, he's such a dork. I'll ask him later what that was all about. Walking out of UA, she sighed, a hand rubbing at her neck as she walked. Geez, it's always the first day that are the worst. All talking, no action. No excitement, just bouncing from teacher to teacher and reading rules aloud. Plus side is she enjoys her class for the most part. There are a few that may be a bit weird, even for her. There was a dude who already has a grudge against Wanna for some reason. They haven't even met yet. I guess some guys need to flex to make themselves less insecure. Pausing her step, she noticed that big back anywhere, smiling a little more. Talk about flexing. Sidling up next to him, she bumped him with her hip, startling him. Green, I can't believe this. Not even offering to walk a girl to the train station? For shame. Startling a little, he turned to see her. His face already tinted red. What? Do you have any idea what dangers are around at night? What would your mother say? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't notice you. Pretending to look offended for a second, she huffed before sighing. All right, fine. You're lucky you're cute. I'll let it slide this time. See, cute? Humming, she showed off some teeth at how flustered he got, before laughing, raising a hand to pat his back. I'm teasing, Green Bean. Relax. Tell me about yourself. As they walked off towards the train station, she listened as Green talked a little about his life. He seemed to be really happy talking about his mom, less so about his dad. Thing to take note of for later. Every once in a while, she would throw in some words here or there, but she mostly listened, trying to have him talk more. She noticed that he almost changes when talking about things he cares about. He loves All Might and learning about quirks. He has a strength-based quirk, which was honestly pretty obvious, and he wants to be a rescue hero one day, which surprised her. Someone so big you'd think he'd want to fight, but instead he seems to be focused on moving wreckage and first aid. The way his eyes sparkled when he spoke was captivating, and the way his dimples popped up when he smiled was beautiful. She felt a twinge of something in her chest as he spoke, and she absently wondered what it'd be like to climb him like a mountain before slamming the feeling back down. No, down, girl. For the next few days, they mostly just hung out. They did a battle trial where Green accidentally threw someone through a wall, and she kicked ass in her own right, smacking Monoma upside his cocky face. Sitting in the cafeteria, they seemed to have gathered a nice little group of friends. Despite his shy nature, Green seems to be really good at gathering hero hopefuls. He accidentally mistook the shy mushroom girl, Komori, as the girl he saved during the test, which she quickly rebuffed to both of their embarrassment. She teased him a lot over it, but they quickly became shy little friends, which was honestly adorable. Then there was Kendo, who after seeing how skittish Green was actively trying to pull him out of his shell. She remembered meeting Kendo's eyes, the first time he started rambling about someone's quirk, and giving a silent agreement to protect this giant cinnamon roll no matter what. Then there was Tetsu, who seems to be following Kendo around wherever she went. Something about being childhood friends, he seemed cool. Finishing up their group was Monoma, much to her chagrin. He seemed to have a grudge with Green the first few days before he touched Green without asking, and kinda went a little crazy. When he woke up, he seems to connect to Green a lot more. Hearing Green talk excitedly, she looked up at him as he spoke, kind of just enjoying him talk. I still can't believe we have lunch rush making food for us any day. Taking a bite of her food, she laughed a little before rolling her eyes. Dude, you've been saying that almost every day. To her left, Kendo smiled before taking a bite of her own food. I'm unsure if I'll ever get used to a pro hero making me food. I personally could eat his shrooms any day, said Komori happily, shoving more into her mouth for good measure. Looking up from his own food, Monoma gave her a small smile. No offense, but I get the feeling that you'd be eating mushrooms regardless of who made them. Laughter filled the table as Komori pouted at him red-faced before conversations branching out into other topic. Nudging Green with her elbow, she opened her mouth to ask him if he started to read the manga she let him borrow when a deep, dark growl came from behind them. Deku. Turning to face the voice, she found herself staring at a very angry-looking spiky kid. He was standing right behind Green and herself, glaring straight up at Green, making him squirm. She immediately thought of a chihuahua angrily barking at a Tibetan mastiff, which would have been hilarious if Green didn't have that terrified look on his face. Wide-eyed, his face had almost gone white, his gaze staring straight at the floor. Feeling defensive, she stood up to growl back at him. Who the hell are you? This little shit ignored her, his gaze never leaving Green as he slammed his fist on the table, making Green's food fly everywhere, his bowl clattering to the ground. Don't ignore me, you fucking coward. Hey Kakin P, pleasure seeing you he. Don't you fucking call me that. It was when Green jerked at his shout that she felt her blood start to boil. Okay, she's had enough of this. Standing between them, she got in between them, ripping this Kakin off of him. Glare met glare as they stared each other down. She doesn't know who the hell this is, but like hell she was going to let him abuse Green like that. She heard chairs shifting to her left and turned a little to see everyone else staring him down as well. Even shy little Komori looked like she was going to do a murder, cracking her knuckles. There was a tension in the air for a second before the blonde punk let out a hard breath, stomping off. This clearly wasn't going to be the last we saw of him. One by one, everyone sat back down, the air almost electric with the intensity of everyone's looks. Sorry, everyone Kakin gets like that sometimes. Turning to look at Green, she frowned, before turning to where he stomped off to. You know that big pile of trash? Why, yeah, Kakin and I have known each other since we were kids. He has an amazing quirk that lets him create explosions. A bunch of pieces started to connect together at once right in front of her eyes. The whole gentle giant thing, the stuttering and apologizing. The way he jumped a little at explosions and would talk excited about his passions, but then backpedal. The self-deprecating comments. Izuku Midoriya was bullied. She felt red-hot anger rush through her again. Has he ever used his quirk on you? What? And no, has he ever used his quirk on you? A pause. No one at the table said anything, but all of the eyes were on Green. Opening his mouth, he closed it before opening it again. He stopped after I came to Yua. Slamming her hands on the table, she got up, her food forgotten as she stomped off to the principal's office. How dare he? Green is the nicest, sweetest boy. He's so gentle and wouldn't hurt a fly. That doesn't mean that pompous, arrogant, spiky-haired little shit could just stomp all over him like that. The school must not know. There is no way they let that. That bully in. Rounding a corner, she heard her name being called behind her. Turning and glaring, she continued to storm down the hallway like a bat out of hell. Green was following her, but even his pleading gaze wouldn't stop here. She was going to have vengeance. What are you doing here? You should be getting new food. I'll be right back. He just looked at her and shook his head. You know I can't let you do that, Takage. Whipping around, she practically growled at him, stomping her foot. Why the hell not? Takage. No, no more excuses. You tell me right now why I shouldn't just throw this little yapping dog under the bus where he belongs. If you can't fight back, then I will. Blinking, she felt some red-hot tears threaten to leak from her face before she fought them back down. Now was not the time for angry tears. Now was the time for action. Waiting a second for a response, she didn't get one. Whipping back around, she started back on her warpath. I can't fight back, Setsuna. She's unsure what it was that stopped her in her tracks. Maybe it was the defeated tone in Green. No Midoriya's voice, or it was how he called her by her first name. But she stopped at the end of the hall, turning back around to face him. It took a second for Midoriya to gather his thoughts, but she waited patiently. When we were little, Kakanara Bakugo and I were close friends. Maybe even best friends. Our moms were friends, so as a kid that made us friends even though we're so different. We both dreamed of being heroes, of beating the bad guy and saving the day. But then our quirks came in. His came in first and everyone praised him, saying how amazing a hero he was going to be. When mine first came in, I was fighting with a kid over an All Might figure and broke his arm. Staring wide-eyed at him, she couldn't help but look shocked, her mouth opening before covering it with her hand. She's heard of quirk accidents when a quirk first activated, but never like that. I sometimes still hear the snap of that little kid's arm. He didn't even deserve it. We were just kids. My quirk is always on Setsuna. It's not like other strength quirks where they channel it, where they can turn it on and off. Mine is tied to my emotions, to my anger. It's gasoline to a roaring fire. I have to be careful all of the time, Setsuna. You don't understand how easy it would be to seriously hurt someone. I live in a world made of cardboard. Walking over to meet her halfway, he slumped down the wall, pulling his knees up to his chest. Wordlessly, she walked over and sat down next to him. When my quirk first activated, Bakugo wanted to train. He wanted for us to spar to prove who had the better quirk, and I just couldn't. I think that was what made him angry at me. Me refusing to fight him, like I was better than him rather than equals. Then he started to bully me. He'd punch me, insult my mom, tell others to torment me. All just to get a rise out of me, so he could prove he was better. You can't prove you're better than someone who won't even play your game. Midoriya looked so defeated at that moment, like a man with all of the strength in the world, but who couldn't throw a single punch. Reaching forward, she gave his hand a squeeze to get his attention. Okay, fine. I understand now, but you can't just sit here and take it your entire life. Keep turning the cheek all your life, and you're just going to end up with some really bruised cheeks. That got a chuckle out of him. It was weak, but it was there. I'll tell you what. If you can't fight back, I'll do it for you. I'm strong enough to carry both of our problems on my back. Giving a big smile, he chuckled as he rubbed tears from his eyes, slowly standing back up. Is that so? That is so. From now on, we're partners. I do the destroying and you protect. How's that sound? That sounds pretty good. Smiling at each other with faint blushes on their faces, they hardly even noticed when the UA intruder sirens went off. Okay, everyone. It's time for the start to the semifinals. The crowd roared with applause. The stadium energy almost palpable in the middle of it all. In this corner, you know him, you love to hate him. He's the blonde-haired bomber, Bakugo Katsuki. Frowning at his opponent, a sneer spread across his face as he stepped up the final steps, his glare so intense it could melt metal. And in this corner, She's a bombshell babe with teeth that can tear. She's my personal pick, Setsuna Takich. On the opposite side, walking up the steps, was Takich, her arms crossing over her chest as she met his gaze with one just as intense. You know you aren't supposed to pick favorites, right? It's bombshell vs bombshell who will win. Letting out a breath, she sighed, her eyes closing for a second before opening them again. This was it. Her and Izuku had come far in the tournament, steamrolling through the competition like the champs she knew they were, and now the only thing in the way was him. He had been antagonistic, rude, and a bad sport. He had cursed at them and threw explosions at them all day, but right now all of that ends. She had been itching all day to get her hands on this little shit. Sure, his power intimidated her, but that wasn't going to stop her. She was going to give this yappy little dog the beating of his life, meet Izuku in the finals, and maybe make out a little. Who knows, she's always open for possibilities. Looking behind her, she met Izuku's gaze in the stadium. He seemed nervous, but he was clearly checking her out. Their eyes met, and she couldn't help herself. Giving him a wink and a little kiss, she watched him blush crimson before looking away quickly. Their friends around him laughing and patting him on the shoulder. Too easy. Turning back to face Kaken, she noticed that he too was staring up at Izuku, but his gaze was anything but friendly. A crack of a whip pulled her from her thoughts as Midnight started to speak. Okay, I want a nice clean fight, you two. No excessive force and no going overboard. This is a tournament, not a blood match. Giving a nod, she went down into her fighting stance. A pause as she stared him down, her fist clenching and unclenching. Go. Sprinting forward in an angle, she rolled, feeling fire flicker against her body before she kept running. Splitting her torso in half, she jumped just in time to avoid Bakugo's kick. It sailing through her missing half before he leapt away using one of his explosions. The problem with fighting someone like Bakugo was that he was always moving, never sitting still for long. He was able to stay up in the air for long periods of time, and he even had projectiles. All of those were things that she had too, but she had a limit to her projectiles. She can't just play keep away from him or else she'll run out of options fast. Swinging a punch, her fist disconnected from her arm, soaring at him at high speed before he ducked under it, blasting it away with an explosion from his palm. Cursing a little under her breath at the faint sting, she felt her legs break into pieces, attacking him from different angles. With a strong kick to the gut, he rolled to his feet, letting out a growl before blasting at her head. Floating away from the blast, she tried to circle him like a wild animal, scanning him as she tried to find any openings. A flurry of punches and kicks connecting to anything she could find. She had to wear him down. She didn't have anything to take him out quick, so her best option was to weaken him first. Almost like he could tell what she was thinking, he crouched down before raising his arm in the air and fire a powerful blast straight up. Her pieces scattered to the blast, making her squint a little against the heat. Before she could regain her bearings, he was on top of her. Gasping, his fist connected with her face reeling back before another blow to her torso. Before a third could connect, she gave him a smirk. Splitting right down the middle, she exploded into pieces before barraging him with minor blows. Each blow seemed to have made him angrier and angrier, his arms swiping at her tornado of limbs. That is enough. Crouching down, he braced himself before firing a concentrated blast straight up, the crowd squinting against the pure heat it radiated. She tried to hold on, she really did, but her pieces scattered everywhere. Blinking her eyes open, she was on the ground, her ears ringing and her body sore. With the small amount of strength left, she looked down at herself. She was mostly just a head and a torso. Shit, that was going to take forever to come back. Struggling to sit up with her stumps, she felt a sharp pain rock her back, Bakugo's foot stepping on her and pinning her down before lifting her. A quick punch to a torso made her vision go blurry. She was turned around to face Izuku in Bakugo's grip. He was standing up with a face she had never seen before. He looked furious, hands squeezing and bending the railing. Even now Bakugo was just using her to get to Izuku. That's when she heard it. A primal shout that chilled her bones. Bakugo. Screw this. With the last remaining strength left in her body, she swung her head back, colliding with the bridge of Bakugo's nose with a satisfying crunch. She fell forward out of the ring and out of bounds. Well, guess she's not going to see Izuku in the finals after all. Making out might still be on the table though. Her vision started to fade, the blurry sight of Izuku worriedly running towards her the only thing she could see. She was too tired to look around. Too tired to keep her eyes opened. She could hear the sounds of Bakugo's pained screams and curses behind her. She hopes he has to get his medal with a crooked nose in front of everyone to see. That'd be fun. Izuku's big arms wrapping around her as he picked her up, carrying her off down the hall. Maybe she could watch the tape that her parents were recording at home. She wouldn't mind watching that prick's nose break a few more times. Last call for Izuku Midoriya. Last call. Standing at his corner, Bakugo let out a mocking scoff, a bandage over his broken nose. Turning to Midnight, he scowled at her before speaking. That fucking coward isn't going to show up. You should just give me my stupid medal so we could all go home. She did not look amused, huffing at him before turning away. Turning back to the stage, he noticed Deku stomping up the steps. Look who decided to finally have a fucking spine. Alright, looks like we're getting a final match after all. The crowd cheered and clapped around them. In this corner, he's the explosive terror. He's the gender-neutral beatdown, Bakugo Katsuki. What a load of shit. All of this hype for a fight that was only going to last seconds. Fucking Deku had never fought back before. This is going to be more like seeing how much Deku could cry than an actual match. And in this corner, he's the gentle giant. He'll break your back with a hug, and then apologize for it. Izuku Midoriya. Something was off about him. Deku hasn't said anything yet. He hasn't even looked around. He's just been staring at the ground, his ugly mop of hair covering his face. It's an angry David vs. Goliath. Let's get it on. Midnight cracked a whip next to them. Okay, I want a nice clean fight, you two. No excessive force. Even now Deku was looking down at him, not even brave enough to meet his fucking eyes. Who does he think he is? I'm going to be the best hero in the world, not him. Well, glad you could finally join us, Deku. Good of you to finally find your balls. Nothing. Frowning, he tried again. It would have been better for everyone involved if you just didn't show up. Then no one has to watch you get beat. Still nothing. You know, I don't know why that shark-toothed bitch has her. Raising his foot into the air, Deku slammed it into the ground. A loud crack filling the air. Stumbling a little at the force, he noticed that he wasn't the only one. Deku shook the arena. Suddenly no one was talking. It was almost eerie how silent it was. Raising his head, Bakugo watched as Deku gave him an angry glare. It looked so odd on his face, but he felt a wave of something come over him as Deku shouted, "Start the fucking match." Midnight looked shaken, most likely because she's never seen him like this before. Yet join the club, lady. Slamming his scowl back onto his face, he got into his fighting stance. Finally, now they can all see who was better. Why, yes, of course. Coughing into her hand, she had a blush on her face. Go. Charging off one of his stronger blasts, it flew across the arena before connecting with Deku's big frame, laughing as he fired off two more. When the smoke cleared, Deku was still walking towards him, his lumbering frame intimidating even from so far away. No matter what he shot at him, he just kept stomping over to him. He didn't even fucking flinch. Watching him get closer and closer, he tried to stay in the air, peppering him from afar, but he kept getting closer. What the hell was this? Where did all of this power come from? He's not an idiot. He knew that if he let Midoriya get close, it was going to be a problem. But he was running out of room. Fine, big guns. Leaping into the air, he started to spin, unleashing his final move, Howitzer impact. A massive explosion rocked the arena, blanketing both of them in red-hot fire. He didn't want to use it, but Midoriya left him no choice. That'll teach him to look down on. A massive arm grabbed him from the smoke, wrenching him from his feet. He was pulled up so they were face to face, Midoriya's furious scowl burning into his eyes. Swinging an arm back, it connected with his face, but he didn't budge. No matter how much she blasted or swung, nothing seemed to work. Midoriya squeezed him, pain rocking through his body. What the fuck? Let go. Don't you ever hurt Setsuna again, or I will personally come back here and break every bone in your body. This wasn't rage that he's known. It wasn't a shouting mother, or two kids fighting on a playground. At that moment, Bakugo realized what this was. Cold, calm fury. Struggling against his grip, he growled, biting at his hand. Fuck you. Lifting Bakugo into the air, Midoriya reeled back and baseball pitched him out of bounds and down the entrance hallway, colliding with a wall. From the outside, he almost looked like a blonde-haired missile. Silence. The only thing that could be heard was Monoma's crazed laughter in the distance. Midnight stood there stunned before slowly shaking her head and raising her whip. Bakugo is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. As the crowd went crazy, 1B watched Izuku Midoriya stomp off back towards the infirmary. They all looked at each other and silently agreed to never make Midoriya angry. Blinking her eyes awake, Setsuna Takage sat up slowly before a big hand held her back down. Don't move just yet. The doctor says to take it slow. Hey, she knows that voice. Looking over, she saw Izuku sitting in a tiny chair before looking around. She was in the infirmary. A low beeping sound filling the room as she noticed that Kendo and Monoma were there as well. Trying to speak, she broke into coughs before clearing her throat and trying again. How long have I been out? They all looked at each other before Kendo spoke. Couple hours. Recovery girl said it's going to take some time for you to fully come back together. Looking down, she noticed that she already starting to come back together. Her right arm already back to her elbow. Taking in the rest of her body, she was mostly just a torso right now. One of her legs was back to her knee, but the other was just a stump. Damn, this was going to take a while. Looking back at Izuku, she noticed something shine around his neck. Looking closer, she noticed that it was a gold medal. Squirming a little under her gaze, she connected the pieces together, her eyes shooting open, gesturing at him with her stump in a vain attempt to point. You beat Bakugo. A snort from next to her made her turn to see Monoma laughing into his hand. He clearly knew something she didn't. Please, if you could call that a fight. I've never seen a more one-sided fight in my life. Silently turning to look at Izuku, he was blushing deeply, slowly turning to look away from her before muttering a little under his breath. He hurt you. Oh, Setsuna felt a deep blush spread across her face as she wiggled slightly in her bed. Oh, she's never had someone fight for her before. Him beating Bakugo for her honestly sounds really hot. Oh no, she's never been so red before. Quick, say something teasing. That's cool. Not like that. Now her friends were laughing. This isn't funny. Her phone rang, and she looked over at it, trying to grab it just to realize no arms. Watching Izuku pick it up, he answered it before angling it on her shoulder. All of them waving at her as they left her room. Hey mom. Yeah, I'm okay. I was wondering. You wouldn't happen to have recorded the final match? Izuku Midoriya fell to his knees panting, a stinging pain running through his arms. Looking down at them, he could see faint burns, his hand clenching and unclenching a fist to see if he could even move them. Hearing some laughs, he looks up to see his ex-best friend and his lackeys. They stood over him looking strong and smug, the chubby one with wings talking happily to the one with longer fingers before laughing. He couldn't hear what they were saying because of a ringing in his ears from the explosions, but he knew that whatever it was mocking him. Kakin, on the other hand, was still frowning down at him. His arms were crossed, But if he tried to do anything that would mean another explosion in his face. How many times have they done this now? Izuku had seriously lost track. He knew that if he just sat back and did nothing, the beatings would stop. But he couldn't do that. Looking behind, he caught a glimpse of a cowering smaller boy. Izuku had always been small, but this boy was really small. He had cute little round ears like a mouse and a long thin tail. Izuku didn't really know him, but he knew he didn't deserve this. "K. Kaken, please. He didn't mean it. Let's stop this." Shaking his head, Kaken scoffed, a scowl spreading across his face. "That's what I hate about you nerds. You talk about being heroes one day, yet you can't even fucking defend yourself. What? You gonna go crying to mommy every time a villain tries to fight you?" Standing back onto his shaky feet, Izuku frowned back at him. Being hero isn't just about fighting. There are healing heroes and rescue heroes. He could still be a hero. He could. He saw the blow coming but couldn't react in time, air escaping his lungs as he fell backwards, clutching his stomach. "Shut the fuck up. Power is the most important thing about being a hero. Only losers can't fight back. I wouldn't expect anything from you, especially since you're a quirkless Deku. What's this kid going to do? Squeak at me?" That was going to bruise. At least it was on his stomach, so he could easily hide it. Tears prickled to his eyes as he let out a cough. Everything hurt. He was burned and beaten. What if he just laid here for a while? It couldn't hurt to just give up. Hearing a scared little squeak from behind him, he shook his head, standing back to his feet again. No, he couldn't just do nothing. "The doctors said I have a quirk. It just hasn't shown up yet." Kaken grabbed at his collar, pulling him in close, a growl escaping his lips as he glared at him. "We both know they lied just to save your feelings, but it doesn't matter. You are weak down to the bone, Deku. You think a quirk is going to fix that?" He couldn't meet Kaken's eyes, only stare at the ground as red-hot tears ran down his face. He was right. He can't even do anything ... It wasn't fair. He wanted so badly to be strong like Kaken, to be like All Might. His mom always told him that real strength meant standing up for what's right even if no one else agrees. It was about getting up no matter how many times you were knocked down. But he was so tired. He didn't want to let his mom know what was going on, but everything hurt all of the time. Closing his eyes, he tried to stop the tears, but they would not stop coming. As he stood there crying, the laughs around him seemed to get louder and louder, mocking him until they got almost painful, the noise raising until it became static. A low, high-pitched noise taking away all of his other senses until nothing. When he came to, he was panting, his larger form hunched. What happened? He blinked, his gaze looking over large hairy arms. He got his quirk. He finally got his quirk. Excitement filled his racing heart as he gazed back at the little mouse boy behind him. He stared back at him wide-eyed. His body was stiff, but there was something else in his face. Izuku couldn't exactly place it. Looking in front of him, he saw Kaken and his two friends. They were also staring at him wide-eyed with the same look on their faces. Kaken was on the ground, a hand over his chest, and there was blood. Taking a step forward, all three of them stepped away from him. Even Kaken crawled backwards away from him. Looking around, his gaze finally stopped at a broken mirror. It had a big crack going down it, but he could still see what he looked like. He was big, even in a hunched form, with long green hair covering his entire body. Jagged teeth came from a long snout, and he had fingers of long, sharp claws. Blood pooled at his claws, dripping down onto the concrete floor. Staring at his bright yellow piercing eyes, he realized what that look was. Fear. Snapping awake, Izuku panted, his green matted hair covering his face as he frantically looked around the room. Looking over the pretty empty room, his heart finally started to come down. Oh, it was that nightmare again. Collapsing against the bed, he stared at the ceiling fan as it slowly spun in a circle. No matter how many times he had that nightmare, relived that memory, it still bothered him. It had been a long time since then, but it clearly still bothered him, coming back to haunt him every once in a while like a ghost in an old horror story. It wasn't until he heard a knocking at the door and the call of his mother telling him to get up did he finally get out of bed. Pulling off his shirt, he stared down at the handful of burned scars across his body, all of them old and healed over the years. Throwing on his new UA uniform, he sighed, softly muttering, "Please be better than the last school," under his breath as he went out to the living room, backpack in hand. There he is, the man of the hour. Hearing her soft voice before he saw her, he turned to smile at his mom, his fingers absently rubbing at the backpack straps. His mom was a short, rounder woman that was also his rock through all of the hard times. She worked herself to the bone as a lawyer when his father left in order to give him a good life. Leaning in, she gave his head a kiss, only chuckling a little at how he squirmed at the affection. "Mom, please, I'm not a little kid anymore." "I know, sweetheart, but I can't help but worry. You're growing up so fast on me." Smiling up at him, she slid a little care package of food into his hands, before giving his backside a playful smack. "Oh, enough of that. Stop acting like we're never going to see each other again. You can't be late for your first day of UA." Giving a nod, he started to head for the door, only stopping when she called after him. Turning to face her, he was almost knocked over when she ran into him, giving him a give hug. Her voice soft and full of love as she whispered to him, "I'm proud of you, my big strong man." He only cried a little when he hugged her back. The train ride down to UA was fairly normal. Groups of people hugged the train car as they talked amongst themselves. Izuku had always hated crowds. The noise and close proximity only made his anxiety spike. Looking over, he saw some interesting people. A girl with pink skin and black eyes. A guy with a raven for a head. There were so many quirks. Muttering a little to himself as he tried to imagine what kind of quirks they had, he hardly noticed the train lurched to a stop. People heading out the doors and disappearing from sight. Following the crowd, he tried to fight down a blush when he noticed some people looking at him. Some seemed creeped out and others seemed amused, but either way their gazes bothered him, making him scurry off faster. Staring up at the two big buildings, he couldn't help but stare. It was so big. I mean, sure, he was just here a while back to take the test, but now he was actually going here. Heading up the steps and farther into the schoolyard, he noticed a young woman, most likely his age. She had strawberry blonde hair that went all the way down to her waist and two long pointed horns poking out of her head. Were those hoofs on her feet? She seemed stressed out about something, staring up at the map of the school and then trying to talk to people walking past her before staring up at the map again. As he got closer, he noticed that she was speaking a broken mix of English and Japanese, repeating words and stumbling over herself. He wanted to help, but he also didn't want to spook the girl. Watching her for a second as she muttered to herself, he leaned over to tap her shoulder, making her jump over and turn around to face him. Oh no, she was cute. Hi, do you need help?" She seemed relieved for a second before frowning again, her mouth opening and closing a few times before speaking. Yes, I need help with a map. I need to find building, no, door." She seemed to have fumbled after that, cursing a little to herself. Before she could say anything else, he tilted his head and responded in the best English he knew. Would it be better if we spoke in English?" She practically jumped on top of him, her eyes wide and smiling big at him. "You can speak English." She was so close. Trying to fight down his blush, he gave a nod. "Yeah, I can speak some English. What can I help you with?" "Thank goodness. I was standing here forever trying to find out where 1B is." I know where that is. Follow me and I can walk you there." Heading off into the campus halls, they absently chatted while they walked. Well, she talked. Izuku mostly tried to not freak out that he was having a conversation with a pretty girl. "I'm Tsunotori Pony. It's nice to meet you." "Wait, no, sorry, last name first." "Pony Tsunotori?" "That's okay. I'm Izuku Midoriya, First name first. She giggled at that. I take it you're from America, pony. Yeah, I was born in Texas, and I always wanted to go to US since I was little. How do you know English so well, Midoriya? Well, growing up I always wanted to be a hero like All Might, so I watched all of his stuff, even his English work. That's so cool. I also loved All Might growing up. I'm glad someone nice like you made it into the hero course. Since you're in 1A, we should have lunched together sometime. Her words stung. Cringing a little, he stopped in his step. There was no way she would know. Don't be too hurt by it. It took her a second to realize that he was no longer leading her as she absently walked ahead, her arms swinging from side to side. Pausing, she turned to see a hurt expression cross Midoriya's face just for a second. He was looking at the floor, absently rubbing his arm before looking up to face her. Sorry, I didn't mean to mislead you. I'm not in the hero course, I was born quirkless. She seemed shocked at that, blinking a few times at him before shaking her head. And no, I didn't mean. Stopping her from continuing, he continued to walk, slapping on the best-faced smile he could before gesturing to the big 1B door next to them. It's okay. I ended up in the support department, so I could still make gear for the heroes I love. It was nice talking to you. Bolting down the hall before she could say more, he ran off, leaving her feeling sad and a little ashamed. Her hand was raised up like she was reaching for him before his back disappeared down the hall. Good start to the school year. Kai Chisaki sat in his office, the only sound being the click and clacks of a keyboard and a ticking of a clock on the wall. As he typed away, he absently thought of the boss, the only man to truly care for him. The man who took him in and cared for him when no one else would. His fingers hovered over the keys, pausing for a second as he thought about what he did. What still needs to be done. Phase 2 would soon be upon them. The mask crinkled a little as he frowned before he started to type away again. It had to be done. The boss had started to go soft over the years. Started to talk about peace and respect. Chisaki's fingers jammed into the keys harder and faster, his frown spreading. He loved him, but the man was a fool. Money was the most important thing. Power was the most important thing. Not fucking rolling over and taking it was the most important thing. Yet why does the look of the old man's face right before he did it keep crossing his mind? His wide-eyed, hurt stare haunting him at night. It was for his own good. He thought of the old man's laugh. It won't be for long. The way he wrapped his arm around his shoulder and called him boy. He'll thank me for this later. The look of worry he used to give him. How he tended to his injuries. How he treated him like family. How he treated them all like family, even those who didn't deserve it. Him telling Chisaki that everything was going to be okay. Each thought made his fingers slam into the keys harder. A growl coming from his lips. It was for his own good. It was for his own good. It was for his own good. It was for... Grabbing onto the keyboard, he stood with a flourish, raising it into the air before slamming it down onto the desk with a crack. Another and another. Over and over. Plastic on wood filling the room until the thing in his hand was bent and twisted. Fuck. Suddenly the door swung open with a bang. Chisaki barely even registered that the man entering the room was the one that was supposed to be watching Eri. He was too busy panting and trying to calm his racing heart. Looking up at him with a glare, he growled out, watching the man flinch a little under his gaze. What? See, Chisaki, sir, there's been a problem. What could possibly be so important? The man let out a swallow, a terrified look coming across his face. She's gone, sir. The words slammed into his chest, ripping him from his rage. Standing straight up, he walked around the desk, giving the man his now undivided attention. What? The girl. She's disappeared. I went to relieve the last man in charge, and she's gone. Wrenching his hand forward, he took hold of his collar, pulling him in close. His voice filled with a silent fury as he slammed him into the wall. "You useless waste of space. Why do I even have you around if you can't even watch one little girl?" Fighting against his grip, the man cried out, his legs kicking as he choked out a pitiful plea, trying to beg to spare him of the pain. Why is everyone around him so incompetent? Don't they see his vision? How important this all was. "Yes, sir, please. It's ... it's not my fault." The pathetic pawn whined. It would be so easy to destroy him right now. But he needed answers. Letting out a huff, he dropped him to the ground, watching him cough and gasp for air. Shaking his head, he started to head back to his desk, the scattered pieces of his keyboard crunching under his feet. "Tell Mimic to lock the place down. No one comes in or out until we find her." The man stood back up onto his shaking knees as he tried to regain his voice, letting out a few more coughs before speaking. "She can't, sir. He's dead." "What?" Turning back to look at the man, he looked him over like it was a joke. "Explain." I don't know what to tell you, sir. He was found chopped in two during the faculty shift. No one even saw or heard anything." Staring at the desk for a second, he leaned down and kicked it over, papers scattering everywhere as he screamed out a furious curse. There was only one person he knew who could operate this cleanly without leaving a single trace. Izuku. The sounds of footsteps splashing through water could be heard as he ran, his movements built to be as quiet as possible. Every once in a while he would stop, hearing someone else walk past before he continued his quiet trek. It wouldn't be long until they noticed that she was gone. He had to move quickly. Stepping out of a dark alleyway was Izuku Chisaki. He was dressed in a long flowing kimono with a katana sheath on his hip. His long, curly, green hair was tied up into a high-tied ponytail. Peeking out, he scanned the alley, waiting to see if he could hear anything. Staring into space for a second, his eyes flashed green, a shift of color moving across his eyes. On his back was a shifting red cloth, wiggling a little before a cute younger girl's head popped out, revealing that Midoriya was carrying her piggyback style. Long silver hair flowed out of its hiding space, and if you looked close you could see that she had a single horn popping out of her forehead. She was known as Chisaki. Her cute face looked around the room, almost imitating Izuku's movements. Her cheeks puffed up as she used all of her willpower to focus. Leaning in close to his ear, she whispered, her tone trying to be serious, but still adorable all the same. "Okay, looks clear." With a nod, Izuku ran down the alleyway, the light of day peeking from the exit of the alley before overlapping the silhouette of their disappearing frame, making everything go white. Principal Nezu expected many things to happen just months before UA has their yearly heroics test. Reports on Power Loader's newest robots. The final touch-ups on the written parts of the test. But what he did not expect was the sound of a knock at his office door. Looking up at the door, his eyebrows slowly raised, his beady eyes scanning it for a second. Strange, everyone had gone home for the day. UA's safety system should have made sure that no one leaves or enters UA without his knowing of it. Looking over at his computer, he looked over the cameras. He didn't see any signs of entry or movement. Looking at the camera outside of his door, he paused, his little eyes widening a little before he smiled. It was the kind of smile that terrified the staff and students alike, the kind he only really gave when something or someone surprised him. Reaching his tiny hands towards his phone, he typed out a number belonging to one of the only teachers he knew that would still be up at this hour. The contact to Eraserhead flashed across the screen for a second before it started to dial. Very interesting indeed. Sitting in the office chair, Izuku Chisaki stared straight ahead, his face unreading and blank. In the corner of his eye, he could see Shota Aizawa, i.e. Eraserhead, leaning against the wall. High eyes were trained on him, a frown on his face as he sized him up. Every time he shifted or moved, Eraserhead tensed. It was faint, but he could tell. Eraserhead was on guard, prepared to spring into action at a single notice. A fight Izuku would like to avoid if he was honest. Looking back at him, Izuku's hand absently traced his katana, refusing to back down from his challenging gaze. He didn't even flinch when Nezu's furry body hopped onto his desk, meeting his gaze with a big smile. "Why is everyone so tense? How about some tea? I always feel like it eases a harsh situation." They nodded and Nezu scampered off, turning his back to Izuku as he rummaged for some cups. Bad move. Leaving himself wide open like that is just begging for trouble. Looking at Eraserhead, their eyes met, almost begging him to try something before he looked back at Nezu's frame, just in time for a cup to be placed before him. Reaching forward, he grabbed at the cup, looking down at it for a second. The brown liquid swished a little as he scanned it, his eyes flashing green before nodding and taking a sip. He didn't acknowledge the looks they gave. Eraserhead looked about ready to pounce on him, and Principal Nezu looked fascinated. Placing his furry hands together, Principal Nezu smiled wide as he spoke, his voice full of mirth. "So tell me, I must know. What brings an infamous assassin carrying a little girl at my door at this hour? The suspense is killing me." The air's temperature almost seemed to get colder, like acknowledging what he was had completely changed the tone of the room. Principal Nezu still seemed fascinated, but there was an edge of danger in his voice, while Eraserhead looked more surprised than anything, like he didn't expect Nezu to just up and say it. Thinking for a second, he spoke in neutral tone. "You know who I am?" "I do. Well, mostly. A deadly assassin known as Oracle, or sometimes called the Green Raven. You have a long list of kills, but I must admit I didn't expect you to be so young. Why, you could practically be confused for one of my first-year students. I have so many questions on my mind that I'd like to ask you, but I first must ask how you got in here. UA is known for having one of the finest securities in the world. Not exactly where someone can just stroll into. The way your security system is designed has a flaw in it. It's built to have its system reset, and all of the code randomized to avoid hacking. But every time it does reset, there is an opening in the security that allows someone to slip in. The opening is there only for a minute tops, but you can slip in if you know when it is." A pause as he took a sip of his drink, Nezu staring at him with his eyebrows raising slowly. He was looking him over for any sign of deceit before laughing. Well, that's certainly a surprise. Guess I should talk to Power Loader and see if we can't get that fixed." Walking over, he took a seat back into his chair, leaning in on his elbows. "Now that that is taken out of the way, to what do I owe the pleasure, Mr. Oracle?" Izuku Chisaki seemed to think for a second, weighing his options before speaking. "I was abandoned at a young age. My mother did not want me when it was believed that I was quirkless. I would have died had I not been taken in by the leader of the Yakuza. The boss cared for me and treated me like his own ... despite everything. I was put into work by another person taken in by the boss, a man known as Kai Chisaki. For whatever reason, Kai always hated me. He would send me on assassination jobs he believed was impossible for me to do, most likely to snuff me out. But he failed. I thrived in my new profession and became what you know me as today. Then a couple years ago, Eri joined us. She has a powerful quirk that when it activated for the first time, it killed her father, her mother abandoning her on our doorstep not long after." Nezu seemed to hum in thought, not risking saying anything, while Eraserhead only got more quiet. "Over time, Eri had taken a liking to me, and so the boss put me in charge of her protection. I think he secretly wanted me out of this life. A while ago, the boss had come under an illness and gone into a coma, putting Kai in charge of everything. Kai hated me before, but now he did it openly. He tried to put the protection of Eri into someone else's hands, and had started to look at Eri with a concerning look." Giving a nod, Nezu seemed to have put the rest together, taking a sip of his own cup before speaking. "So you saw the writing on the wall and escaped with Eri bringing her here?" A nod was all Nezu got in response. "Interesting, simply interesting. But I must ask, why bring her here?" Surely there are other places to take her. As you have said before, I am infamous. Over the years, I have killed heroes and villains alike, leaving me with not many options. Most people I know I can trust is in the Yakuza, and those may be compromised due to Kai's reach. I can go to the police, but again, there are too many unknowns. My quirk told me that the best option was you, Principal Nezu. Nezu perked a little in his seat, his ears going straight up for a second as his smile got wider. Really now? Do tell. Over the years, you have shown a history of going against the grain of hero society, fighting for not only your rights as a hero, but for other mutant types as well. You are not afraid to fight for what you believe in, and honestly, I believe a part of you just really enjoys stirring the pot. I believe you will help us. Nezu sat there for a second in thought. His face pointed down at the desk before you could hear a faint chuckle, the chuckling growing louder until it turned into a mad cackling. His eyes wide and manic as he slammed a furry paw down onto the desk, making Erasure head shiver at the sight. Principal Nezu sitting back with a happy sigh. Oh, Mr. Oracle, you are too much. I think I quite like you. Staring up at the ceiling, he rolled his head a little, calculating what next to ask in his head. Izuku could practically see the numbers like Nezu was thinking about the next move in a game of chess. Now that you brought it up, I must know what your quirk is. People online seem to believe you can see the future based on how not a single trace of you has been seen, but I believe it's something else. I would love to know. When all he got was a harsh glare and silence, Nezu let out a laugh, leaning in slowly to study him. Come now, Mr. Oracle. I thought you came to us to be allies. How are we to protect little Eri if you won't confide in us? Sighing, he closed his eyes. He was right. There was no point keeping secrets if he wanted them to trust each other. That doesn't mean he has to like it, though. No, my quirk doesn't let me see into the future. My quirk is a lot like your own, Principal Nezu, an intelligence quirk. Unlike yours, however, it doesn't make me smarter. It merely shows me potential outcomes based off what I know. When I had assassination jobs in the past, the most effective way was to know as much as possible. Quirks, locations, building schematics. The more knowledge meant the cleaner a run. If I don't know something, it leaves a blank spot in my visions I call an unknown. Unknowns are unpredictable, potentially dangerous, and should be avoided at all cost. Erasure head stared wide at the younger boy, his gaze shifting from a very happy Nezu back to him again. That sounded extremely dangerous. The ability to read him like an open book based on previous fights and personality. Even if the quirk doesn't help him physically. Aizawa absently wondered what it would be like to teach such a child. Opening his mouth to ask something, he was interrupted over Principal Nezu, shouting out the next question before he could say anything. Fascinating, Mr. Oracle. Simply fascinating. With a quirk like that, your skills ceiling could be potentially endless. I can think of so many ways you could do good in the world. That being said, you don't seem the type. So my last question is this. Why are you doing all of this? Just to save a single girl. For self-preservation. Erasure head watched as the boy seemed to think, taking a sip of his tea. But when he opened his mouth, it wasn't an answer he expected. I do not know why. My love for the world has died the day I was abandoned. In all intended purposes, it does not make sense. What I do know, however, is that Eri is too good for this world. I have watched her come out of her shell and bloom in a place she should have never been in the first place. Maybe she represents an innocence I lost, or perhaps I've come to love her like a brother. As he spoke, Aizawa felt a wave of killing intent from the boy, his body growing tense as he stood up, his gaze burning into Principal Nezu. Keep this in mind. If anything would happen to her, I will burn this world to the ground. Turning around, he stomped out the door, opening it to find Eri listening in. A startled yelp could be heard as they both disappeared from sight. To say Shota Aizawa was surprised was an understatement. Something about hearing a young adult talk with such a cold nature really shook him. He was an underground hero. He knew that the world was cruel. Flash floods, drug peddling, petty crime, human trafficking, he's seen it all. Yet, for whatever reason, the cold, calculating look in Oracle's eyes bothered him the most. He stood there staring at the closed door with knitted eyebrows before turning when he heard a snicker. Nezu was fucking laughing. Watching the rodent pour tea down his throat made him tense. You aren't seriously considering helping them, are you? And what if I am? Looking back at the door, he let out a sigh, running a hand through his long black hair. That kid is nothing but a ticking time bomb. You heard him. He only cares about that little girl. His boss hummed, turning back to his computer, slowly typing away before smirking a little in thought. Then I suppose we should make sure nothing happens to little Eerie, shouldn't we? Silence, except the sound of typing before another pause. While we're at it, might as well turn Mr. Oracle into a proper hero. After all, we do teach a school for hero hopefuls, don't we? I welcome the challenge. Standing in a crowd of people, Izuku Chisaki wandered towards the front of the gates, a painted line on the ground telling him not to walk closer. The sound of idle chatter and bragging could be heard in the air, his hands fiddling with his katana sheath before pulling it off and kneeling onto the ground. Destroying robots. A test that benefits those born with more physically impressive and flashy quirks, but a test that's not impossible. Closing his eyes, he activated his quirk, his mouth moving at a heightened speed as he mapped out his route. Judging from the pictures provided, the robots were most likely weak in the joints and necks. They wouldn't put unstoppable robots in a test for college students. They most likely were designed in a way to be destroyed by hand or built with weaker metals. Judging from the size of the walls and the time it took to get here, the environment was most likely a buildingscape. Something to replicate the most common location for fights in hero society. The best bet would be to hit them hard and fast. He doesn't have to beat the other contestants, simply be faster than them. That was something he could do, and he excelled in dark alleyways. The unknown of the zero-pointer was concerning, but it was surely built as a distraction, a way to keep those competing from scoring as much as they should. Opening his eyes, a green flash sparked across his eyes. Got it. Movement to his left made him turn his head. A girl about his age, waving a hand across his face. Long blue hair and a big smile on her face. She was just looking at him with such a big smile. She absently made him think of her. Hey, are you okay? You've been sitting here for a while and talking super fast. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I do it all of the time. Wow, your hair sure is green. It's so fluffy, I just want to touch it, but that'd be rude. Are you aware everyone is staring at you like you're a crazy person? Not in a re kind of way, but in a coo kind of way, you know. Blinking a few times, he couldn't help but stare. That was a lot to say in so little time. Reaching down to grab his blade, he got back up, slowly patting himself off. I'm fine. Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure. Before he could respond to the crazy woman, another crazy person came out of the crowd. What was it with this place and having so many crazy people? Stomping over to him, the blue-haired man waved his stiff arm to and fro. His voice was loud and grating. You there? Who told you you were allowed to bring a dangerous weapon onto the property? He bellowed, fog practically fogging his glasses with indignation as he reached for his blade. Izuku immediately wrenched it out the stranger's hands, shooting him with a death glare that made him flinch away. The man was glaring at him, but he showed no sign of reaching for him again. Closing his eyes, Izuku gave a tired sigh before fashioning the blade back onto his hip. The test allows for participants to bring registered equipment to help with people not born with physically powerful quirks. This is allowed. Turning away from the man, he faced forward again, tuning out anything else the man said as he refocused again, unaware of anything either of them were saying. This was not the time for something so petty. He intended to win. Yua would only put them under protection if he got in. All right, everyone, let's get it on. A pause as everyone looked at each other. That means go. There are no countdowns in real life. Jumping a little in place when Nejire and Ida faced forward again, they noticed the green-haired man already sprinting fair ahead and into the testing grounds. All Nejire could do was stare as he sprinted off, her eyes wide as she shouted out, "He's so fast!" Running down an alleyway he spun, slicing along the robot's tires before wiping around and taking off his head, not even bothering to look at it before he continued his assault. That was 30 points he counted aloud, dashing past some other distracted contestants and removing the robots he knew they could not. He could hardly beat any of them if it was just about physical power, especially since he was more or less fighting quirkless. But he had the training, the speed, and the ability to gauge a situation in an instant. Leaping into the air, he brought the blade down, bisecting a three-pointer's head in half before pulling the blade free. He was unaware that he was being recorded, the video of his actions playing over screens with many eyes watching him. "He's pretty impressive, if I do say so myself," cackled Principal Nezu, his gaze flickering to other contestants before back to Izuku's screen. I was unsure how he would fare against non-human opponents. The tall, skinny blonde man stared for a second before letting out a hearty chuckle, patting his lip with a handkerchief. "Yes, the boy's movements are very fluid. Where did you say you found him, Principal Nezu?" "Oh, he's just a stray I took in a while back. He may come off crass, but I see a good head on his shoulders." Grumbling, the cowboy watched the green-haired boy as well, watching him destroy another three-pointer before dashing down an alleyway. He would make a good stealth hero if he wasn't so ruthless. "That's the 5th kill hit I've counted." The boy seems to show no remorse at all. With a blade like that he could do some serious damage to a person. Snickering, Midnight let out a laugh, patting him on the shoulders. "Says the hero that mainly uses a gun." Crossing his arms, Vlad King blew out some hot air before speaking up. "I agree with Snipe. We teach students to be heroes, not trained soldiers. I've yet to see him even try to help a single contestant." Listening to them all talk amongst themselves, Nezu continued to smile at the screen. "I'm sure he just needs a little persuading." Reaching forward, his little pay pressed at a big button. The ground shook, chunks of rock coming down around him as he came out of his hiding spot. This was not predicted. Turning a corner, he watched a giant robot emerge from the ground, its massive lumbering frame clambering forward and destroying all in its wake. Ah, the zero-pointer. He seemed to have miscalculated how crazy the rat truly was. This was much more than a distraction. Frowning, he watched it for a second before sighing, his eyes flashing green as he corrected his quirk. No matter, the thing was too slow to catch him. All he had to do was move location and continue picking off stragglers. Anyone who got caught by that thing didn't deserve to be here. The thing was a slow-moving tank, nothing more. Turning to leave, he heard a yelp, his gaze tracking on a brunette woman trapped under rubble. Well, that was unfortunate, but also none of his concern. Watching her struggle under the rock, as the robot got closer, he wondered if Yua would actually kill someone trying to go to their school. They did sign waivers after all. Before he could continue that thought, the blue-haired woman from before flew in from a rooftop, her hands glowing as she moved the rock off of the other woman. What a waste of time. Using so much effort for another person. Pulling the woman free, they both started to get out of the way of the robot. A loud shake made a chunk of the roof start to fall, heading for the both of them. He was unsure why he did what he did. This was not the optimal route. This path was not the one that led to the most points, or even the one that was the safest. It was full of unknowns and blank spots. Potential dangers just hiding in spaces that he did not know and could not predict. Maybe it was how scared the brunette looked, or maybe it was the look in the blue-haired woman's eyes. The way her eyes sparkled as she struggled to pull another contestant away. It was at that moment that she reminded him of Ares, so happy and full of life. Running forward, he yanked the both of them away from the chunk of falling rubble. his arm slinging under the brunette's other side as they pulled her to safety. When the alarm came, they all sat far away from the danger, panting, the large lumbering silhouette of the turned-off zero-pointer in the distance. Robots ran to and fro, helping any who were injured as a surly old woman healed those she could. His eyes scanned the carnage. No one seemed too hurt. Most of it looked like sprains and things that could be shaken off with some good sleep. He knew Yua didn't have it in them to kill. The sound of a clearing throat snapped him out of his thought. The brunette woman trying to get both of their attention. At a closer look, he noticed that she had round pink marks on her cheeks. She smiled wide at them, speaking of words of happiness. Frowning, he didn't like how they made him feel. She should not be so nice. Everyone is out to get something, and nothing is free, he told himself. Kind words were rarely spoken out of pure kindness. Raising a hand, he stopped her, shaking his head as he started to walk away. Think nothing of it. Next time, think before being a liability. The two watched him walk off, staring at him as he headed for the exit. Ochako watched, her mouth hanging open with shock before huffing and crossing her arms. Geez, what a jerk. As he started to disappear from sight, Nejire couldn't take her eyes off of him, a frown tugging at her lip. I don't know. He just seems really sad to me. Kyoka Jiro's parents always told her that if you loved your work, you didn't work a day in your life. She understood to an extent what they meant. Having a teacher speak openly about their passion got her through one of her hardest subjects, math. There was just something about how a person's eyes light up when they speak that makes you want to feel that way as well. She'll always be grateful to Mr. Hiro for helping her pass high school. In comparison, a teacher who's only there for the paycheck comes off boring and exhausting. But at the end of the day, it was still a job, right? You can only work so long until you get burnt out from it. That's probably the reason why she never thought about doing music for a living like her parents. Don't get her wrong, she loves music. There are days where her parents would joke and say, she listens to music as easy as she breathes. Yet she always kept it secret. From her friends, from the people in her life. It always came off embarrassing or like braggy, you know. The first time she saw him, she was jogging along the pier. She made it a mission to get into UA, and that meant getting into shape. There was no way that the most popular hero college in the country was just going to let anyone in. She ran herself to the bone some nights, honing her body to be as fit as she could. It was on one night that she heard it. She was finishing up her run when she heard the most beautiful song she's ever heard. She's unsure how to describe it. The song was beautiful, with happy notes and a beat that made her turn towards it. It felt so sad though, like the notes were used in a way to hide a great sadness. As she wandered through the pier, she found a boy playing a flute. He didn't come off as anything special. He was kinda on the plain side, if she was honest. He wore baggy clothes and headphones over his ears. He was short, not shorter than her, but for sure more on the short side with a lean frame. He had a poof of purple hair on his head with lighter streaks going through it poking out of the headphones and a light speckle of freckles. He was just standing there, playing his beautifully sad song as people walked past. Some of the people tossed cheap change into a tip jar that was his flute case as they wandered past him. But judging from the amount in the case, he looked mostly ignored. Something about that really irked her. He was playing his heart out for the world to see, and yet the world did not seem to care. She stood for longer than she should have watching him play. He looked almost lost to the world. She only really snapped out of it when he stopped playing and started to pack up. Shaking her head, she smacked at her cheeks as she turned and started back onto her run. What the hell was that? She had made it a goal to run past that spot every time she went on a run to hear him play. Every time he played a different song, but no matter how upbeat or different it was, she could hear a hint of sadness in the notes. It was after the 5th or 6th time that she decided she wanted to meet him, but she was unsure on how to do it. It would be really weird to just walk up to him and go, "Hey, I don't know if you know me, but I'm that weird girl that keeps staring at you every day that you play. I swear I'm completely normal and not a stalker." So one day, she did something that honestly might have been more embarrassing. She pulled her favorite violin from her room, walked down to meet him at the pier, sat down near him, and started to play as well. He was playing a song she was familiar with, so she kind of just joined in. She plucked away at her violin, playing out the beginning strings. His bright green eyes were on her as she played. He looked confused for a second before smiling, letting out a small chuckle before starting on his part. Kyoka Gyro had always hated playing with other people before. She had never found someone that she jived with. It had always felt like a competition, like they were trying to outdo each other. This felt different though, less like a battle of egos and more like a dance. She played some, he played some, they played together. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. She was unsure how long they sat like that. Song bled into song. When she finally snapped out of it, the sun had set, and the pier was mostly empty. Looking over to him, he seemed just as surprised. His eyes looking over the empty pier before looking back at her. He stared at her before letting out a laugh and a smile, turning to pack up his stuff. Her face was so red as she turned to do the same. What the hell was that? He definitely thought she was weird or something. Who just barges in and invades someone's jam sesh like that? Her mind was racing as she put her violin away. She just wanted to be part of the beautiful song. She didn't even think about how weird it looked from the outside. Jumping a little, she felt her shoulder tapped, whipping around to stare at him. "It was nice playing with you. Here's your cut." His hand was held out to her with a nice chunk of change. Oh, he thought she wanted in on the money. Shaking her head, she placed her hand on his and gently pushed it away. "Keep it. I don't really want the money." His eyebrows rose at that, looking her over again with a skeptical look. "Well, now I feel bad. You have to want something. You can tell me your name." Her mouth snapped shut as soon as the words left her mouth. She could feel a blush spreading across her face. Where the hell did that come from? She watched mortified as his eyes snapped wide, his face turning just as red before letting out a full laugh. She liked his laugh. It sounded nice. Dang, that was smooth. I'm suffering whiplash from how quick that was. He laughed as he rubbed his neck before smiling at her. "Sure, I'll tell you my name only if I get yours in return." A giggle bubbled up from her throat, which immediately made her cringe. She was not some giggling schoolgirl. What the hell was going on with her? Before she could respond, she watched the mysterious boy get pulled into the air by a kid from behind. He had jagged, sharp teeth and spiky black hair. "There you are, you fucking villain," he bellowed, pulling her new jam buddy by the collar of his shirt and off of his feet. Another one came up from her side, his long fingers stretching to get between him and her. He had a smarmy look on his face and long, straight brown hair. Even the sound of his voice made her want to punch him. "We've been looking all over for you. Just wait until Bakugo hears about your little hiding place," he bellowed. Her new purple-haired friend squirmed a little in the grip before sighing. "If it isn't thing one and thing two, I'm surprised you guys took your time to pull your heads out of Kaken's ass long enough to find me." "Shut up." Right, so her new friend was only making things worse. Running a hand down along her face, she sighed before trying to get between them, only to be stopped by the finger asshole. His eyes looked her over with a pervy gaze that made her cringe before leaning against the wall, a hand slicking his greasy hair back. The asshole was trying to pick her up right now. Seriously. Getting into a fighting stance, her earphone jacks hovered in the air like snakes posing to strike, her fist clenched in front of her face. Let him go. Before she could tear this guy a new asshole, she watched her jam buddy twist himself free from the shark mouth guy's grip, spin around and crack his flute case over the pervert's head. "Come on, guys. Go be weird perverts on your own time. I don't have all day." The pervert spun around, clutching his head and cursing. Looking her way, the mysterious flute player gave her a wink, a little salute, and then he flipped backwards onto a roof and ran off. All she could do was stare confused as the two guys cursed at each other, pointing after him. Them running off after him, screaming the whole way, completely ignoring her. Huh. The guy had a jumping quirk. She didn't get to see him after that. Every time she jogged past, she hoped to hear him play, but he wasn't there. He must have moved to a different location after those two found him. It really put a damper on her whole mood. She got so used to hearing him play every day that it was weird to not hear it. She might have worried her parents a little with how she moped around for a few days after that. Staring at an old, worn-out poster of Present Mike's radio show, she sighed. She couldn't mope around forever. She still had to train for UA. The next time she saw him was at the UA test. Funny enough, the auditorium she was ushered into was massive. It had rows upon rows of seats, and more than half of the seats were already taken. Looking over the vast amount of people, she saw his purple tuft of hair poking out of headphones across the way, making her heart skip a beat. So he was a hero hopeful as well. He didn't seem to be talking to anyone, just facing forward and writing something in a notebook next to a very angry-looking blonde. Silently hoping he got in, her thoughts were interrupted with a loud shout, her hands going to clasp at her ears. All right, everybody. It's time for the live performance part of the test. Spotlights flicked on, and standing in front of them was Present Mike, the voice hero. Leaning on her arm, her smirk became more of a genuine smile, watching Present Mike do his stick. It would be embarrassing to admit out loud, but she used to love Present Mike when she was little. Watching a hero save people and play music was more inspiring than she'd like to admit. She couldn't tell you the amount of times her and her family sang to songs playing over Present Mike's radio bonanza while they were on road trips. Nowadays, she saw him more as an equally embarrassing second dad. Someone you love in secret, but never actually tell them for fear of their head growing too big. All right, lil listeners. Listen up, because I'm only going to tell you once. The physical part of the test is going to be held in a suburban artificial setting about a 30-minute drive from here. You'll have roughly 10 minutes to rack up as much points as you can. The monitor behind him flickered to life, showing shots of the environment they were supposed to participate in, followed by a chart of different robots. There are 3 types of robots that will have a number written on them. Each number is the amount of points they are worth. You'll need to destroy as many as you can within the 10-minute time frame. Ya dig? Just remember, villainous acts such as attacking your fellow examinees or sabotage will get you disqualified. Nodding along, she looked around the room. Makes sense. This is a hero school after all. I have a question. Standing up from his seat, a blue-haired man with glasses raised his arms straight up. His stiffness made her think of a robot man. Yo, we got a caller. What's your question, lil listener? Raising the piece of paper they were given, he waved it back and forth as he spoke loudly, practically shouting loud enough for the whole world to hear. On the printout, there are 4 robots written down, not 3. If this is a typo, this is very unprofessional of a prestige university, such as UA, and a slander against the reputation of this fine establishment. Looking down at her own paper, she raised an eyebrow. Sure enough, there was a 4th robot. It didn't look like a typo, though. She's sure he just hadn't brought it up yet. Looking up just in time, she watched the robot man gesture his arm to her jam buddy, loudly shouting at him. Also, you there. Take those headphones off. Headphones are against UA policy. Looking back and forth between the two, a frown lightly tugged at her lip. That was a little uncalled for, calling him out like that. The purple-haired teen turned and looked at the robot man with a confused look. Raising his eyebrows a little, he tilted his head before signing something to him with his hand. Her sign language was a little rusty, but it looked like he was asking a confused question. The auditorium was quiet for a split second before bursting into laughter. The robot man's face turned bright red before bending at a 90-degree angle, screaming apologies. Letting out a laugh, she shook her head before leaning back in her seat. Examinee 7111, please do not harass fellow contestants. I must remind everyone that we are all inclusive at UA. Shaking his head, she could see amusement on Present Mike's face. As for the fourth robot, good catch. Yes, there is a mystery fourth robot. It's not worth any points though. It's more there to stir the pot, so to speak. I'd suggest not fighting it unless you really have to. People muttered excitedly around her, and she found herself getting hyped as well. This is it. What she's trained for. That's all, lil listeners. Please leave in an orderly fashion and meet at your designated points. Don't forget to have a good time. Let's hear the university's motto as a special little period on this presentation. Standing up, she smiled as she raised her fist in the air, along with the rest of the auditorium. Plus ultra. Let's do this. After all, how bad could it be? Bad. It could be very bad. The ground shook as she ran, chunks of rock falling around her. What kind of test was this? Who the hell puts a massive robot in the middle of a test? Stir the pot, my ass. Steeping aside, she watched a chunk of rock fall next to her. She was doing so well too, with a nice 32 points under her belt. Until the test decided to become bullshit. People panicked and ran all around her. How could everything go tits up so fast? Hearing a yelp, she looked behind her. A brunette woman pinned under a chunk of rubble. Oh great. Watching her struggle under the rock, she sighed before making a mad dash for her. This was so stupid. Surely Yua wasn't actually going to kill this girl. Reaching her hands under the rock, she gritted her teeth as she tried to lift it, her arms bulging under the weight. No good. She mostly trained to be quick, not strong. As the robot got closer and closer, she panted, her heart racing. Looking up at the blue sky, she racked her brain thinking of what to do. Common girl, think of something. Movement in the corner of her, I made her turn. It was her jam buddy. He was hopping from rooftop to rooftop before making a running leap at the massive robot. She watched with wide eyes as he bounced off nothing, tucking and rolling before leaping again. Kyoka Gyro once saw a video on the internet about a group of teens jumping from building to building without using their quirks. It was honestly crazy to see what a person could do without their powers, the physical prowess of people when they adapt. This was like that. His lean frame hopped and flipped all over the place. Only he wasn't touching the ground. He was bouncing and running on air. Doing a flip, she watched him dive boots first right through the glass eye of the robot, the massive frame shaking a little from the force. Shaking her head from the shock, she took a deep breath, letting out a low hum. Building reverb, she started to get louder, her jacks vibrating faster and faster until it started to get unbearable. Reeling them back, she jammed them both into the rock, expelling the force and causing the chunk of roof to burst apart. With a shaky breath, she leaned down to help the brunette girl up, helping her onto her feet before pulling her away. As they walked together, Kyoka holding her off her messed up leg, she watched the brunette girl look behind them with a look of awe in her eyes. Do you think he's okay? The massive lumbering robot teetered behind them as they walked, slowly leaning back before falling over. Yeah, I'm sure he's fine. The next time she saw him after that was in the dorms. He seemed to be up and about as she lifted her stuff up into her new dorm room, but they didn't talk. The only sign that he recognized her was when their eyes met and his widened a little, a happy smile pulling at his lip. She didn't dwell on how that made her feel. Instead, she focused on meeting everyone that she was going to live with for the next 4 years. Not that she really had a choice in the matter, because she found herself being pulled out of her room by a bunch of the girls and sat down in a circle across from the boys. They gathered most of the a class together in a circle and were doing introductions one at a time. The girls seemed nice. There was Uraraka, i.e. Rebel Girl. She didn't seem to like the nickname, but it was that or Pukey. An invisible girl named Hagakure, or as she lovingly put into her phone, Holly. A pink-skinned girl named Mina who kept insisting she be called Moth Mama. Chuyu. A froggy girl that just wanted to be called Sue Cause. That's what friends call her. It only made her a little happy that she already has so many cool girlfriends. And last, but not least, Momo. A very curvy girl that she started to call Yamomo. Out of all of the girls, Yamomo was already her favorite. She was so soft-spoken and refined. Talking to her made her think of the movie Pride and Prejudice that her mother used to watch all of the time, except without any of the snobby stuff. Also, she was hot, which was a bonus in her eyes. Not that the others weren't smoking in their own right, but Yamomo was for sure on top. Snapping out of her by thoughts, she listened to the boys introduce themselves now. They were nice enough. None of them seemed like too big of a pervert, well, besides the little purple baby. It really says something about a person that you've just met them, and you already want to punch them in their stupid face. Then they finally got to her mysterious musician friend. He was sitting across the way from her with headphones and a lazy smile on his face. Honestly, he looked just as thrilled to be there as she was. Sitting up some, he gave them all a smile and wave before speaking. Hey everyone, name's Izuku Tsutsumi. I like learning about quirks and playing the flute. My quirk is air platform. It allows me to turn the air into thin invisible barriers. She watched namely Momo and Uraraka perk up a little at that, smiling more genuinely at him when he mentioned playing the violin. Looks like she's not the only one who's a fan. Across the way, Ida stared wide-eyed at him, his mouth opening and closing a few times like an exasperated fish before frowning at him. Opening his mouth, he went to say something only to be interrupted by Uraraka. That sounds like a really powerful quirk. People nodded around her, making Tsutsumi let out a nervous laugh, rubbing at his neck. Yeah, it can be pretty versatile, but the barriers are pretty thin and can be broken super easily. You can break one just by punching it. I mostly use them for movement. Momo nodded at that. Still, it sounds quite useful. Uraraka already mentioned what you did at the test, and I must say I'm quite impressed. Not only that, but I adore flute music. I would love to hear you play something. Standing up abruptly, Ida shouted, gesturing at him with both of his arms. You can talk? Tsutsumi looked confused for a second before letting out a laugh, running a hand through his curly hair. Oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you in front of all of those people, Ida. Gesturing to the headphones resting on his ears, he sighed. An accident happened to me when I was younger, so now I have a constant ringing in my ears. The support companies built these so I can still hear, and to stop me from hurting my eardrums further. It was kind of a long story to shout over the auditorium, so I played dumb. It didn't look like that completely quelled Ida's rage, but it for sure placated it for now. He sat down with a huff, his face slightly red. The conversation continued on from there, but she could feel a pair of heterochromatic eyes glaring at Tsutsumi from across the room. The clock ticking on the wall felt like nails in a coffin, each tick hammering down hard into the class of 1A's moral. No one bothered to say anything, as they all hyped themselves up for the big event. The tension was so thick, you could practically cut it with a knife. The UA Sports Festival was upon them. She and everyone else had spent months training and preparing. It's crazy to think it's only been a few months since she joined Class 1A. There was the first day of class where the purple pervert got expelled for grabbing Yamomo's ass, and the USCH where the League of Villains invaded trying to kill All Might. Looking over at Tsutsumi, she noticed that he was unusually quiet, staring at the ticking clock as time counted down, his foot moving up and down in a jittery fashion. She knew that he had to do the opening speech this year, but she didn't expect him to have this response. Sure, he had moments of anxiety, but he usually came off confident and self-assured. Leaning over, she punched his shoulder playfully. Don't go peeing yourself right before the big event. Looking back at her, he gave her a relieved smirk back before speaking. Yeah, you wish, sorry, I'm just a little nervous with what I need to do. His wording was weird. What he needs to do. Hey, don't worry. No matter what happens, I have your back. Giving her a genuine smile, he nodded. Staring into his bright green eyes, she started to think about how close they were getting. Playing music together and cracking jokes. He slowly started to worm his way into her heart, pulling her out of her weird music funk and helping her with her anxieties about playing in front of people. She honestly wasn't sure what she would do without him. She was still unsure where they stood right now or what she felt for him. When this is all over, she made a mental note to ask him about it. She was so lost in thought, she didn't even notice Todoroki approaching them until he was upon them. His voice cold and stoic. Tsutsumi. It's been bothering me for the longest time. I've been trying to find out if you were a legacy child. That got everyone's attention. All eyes on them as Todoroki spoke. It's obvious with how well you use your quirk that you were trained just like Ida or I. I can't seem to place who they are, but at the end of the day it doesn't matter. I'm going to crush you. This is my declaration of war. Izuku Tsutsumi stared at the floor in thought before meeting Todoroki's gaze with a scoff. For the first time ever he looked furious, his gaze making her stare with widened eyes. Even Todoroki seemed a little put off by how he looked. Izuku stood up and rolled his shoulders. His gaze hardened with spite. We all have our reasons for being here, Todoroki. I don't know, nor do I care about your family drama. Looking over the room, everyone stared at him in awe, his gaze drifting over the room before landing on Bakugo. If you all want to fight over each other like crabs in a bucket, be my guest. Turning, he started to head for the door, the bell ringing telling them it's their turn to walk out. With a look over his shoulder, he met Todoroki's gaze one last time before rolling his eyes and walking out of the room. I have something more important to do. Squinting against the blinding light, she, along with the rest of the class, walked out into the stadium. A massive cacophony of screams and shouts made her ears ring as voice bled into voice, leaving them with a single monstrous sound. Following the backs of Izuku and some of the rest of their class, she wandered out of the tunnel and onto the field. The stadium was filled with thousands of spectators. Their gazes bore into all of them like a spotlight. She wasn't even sure where to look, there were so many people. Not a single empty seat in the house, huh? Might as well be a concert. A very big concert. Uraraka muttered out a wow next to her. Let's give it up for Class 1A. Present Mike's voice echoed over the speakers as they made their way to the raised stage designated for them. All right. Now let's give it up for Class 1B and General Ed. Oof. Pairing 1B and General Education together wasn't exactly fair. No wonder everyone at US seems to have it out for them. Turning, she watched hordes of other students walk out into the field. The amount of students not in 1A or 1B was at least 5 to 1. She had no idea there would be so many of them. Looking over the unknown faces, she stopped a second at that one tired-looking guy who said he was going to replace one of them a couple days ago. He was facing straight ahead, not talking to anyone. His face completely unreadable. Weird. Soon everyone had gathered together in the middle, ready to begin the games. Introducing today's referee. It's the R-rated heroine, Midnight. Walking onto the stage, their art teacher Midnight was completely dressed in her revealing hero costume. Raising her whip into the air, she brought it down with a crack. All right, everyone. I expect all of you to be good little boys and girls. Turning, she struck a pose, licking her lips seductively. Or be punished. The audience went crazy around them, her hungry gaze looking over the entire class before straightening herself out. But first, let's hear some words from the freshman representative. He placed first in the entrance exam with a total 81 points. Izuku Tsutsumi. Walking through the crowd of people, she watched as Izuku made his way to the stage. He had a determined, deathly serious look in his eyes as he walked. His shoulders were straight as he marched. Even from here, she could feel everyone's gaze on him, watching and judging him as he made the long trek up the steps. Taking the mic from Midnight, she whispered some words of encouragement to him before stepping back to give him the stage. Unlike backstage, he didn't seem to show a single sign of being nervous, his movements showing a sign of confidence. He took a deep breath, ignoring the harsh stares. The whole world was watching him now, waiting to see what he'd say. Time to make a statement. My name is Izuku Tsutsumi. You may not know the name Tsutsumi, but there is another name you may know. Lady NagaBT. The crowd was full of whispers at that, all of them caught off guard with what was happening. Lady NagaBT is my mother. When she was younger, my mother was taken in by the HPSC. She was groomed by them, trained to be an assassin and kill for them. She fought and killed all that she was asked, while being whispered false promises and lies. She killed until the pile of bodies got too big, and she cracked under the guilt and pressure. When their toy was broken, the HSPC made her look like a villain, faked her death, and locked her away in Tartarus. As Izuku's voice echoed through the speakers, everyone watched in rapt attention. His speech being shown to the entire world. Taking a deep breath, Izuku gripped his mic tighter. My mother was the kindest and most optimistic hero I have ever known. She was my hero. And now she's gone. You all don't deserve her. So instead you have to deal with me. Looking at a camera, Izuku's burning eyes glared out into the world. Hundreds of thousands of people staring back. I don't know who you are. But what I do know is that I will find whoever did this. I don't care if I have to drag you by the hair, kicking and screaming into the light. But I will find you. And I am getting my mother back. Dropping his mic onto the ground, he stomped back to the rest of his class. The reaction spreading like a wildfire, slowly spreading from person to person until the stadium devolved into chaos. The panicked voice of Present Mike could barely be heard over the radio speakers. Go to commercial. Go to commercial. In a long, dark council room full of chairs, a handful of men and women whispered amongst themselves. They whispered in panicked voices at the news. Calm down, everyone. Calm down. A tall, lengthy woman spoke, her suit nicely pressed and clean. No one will believe the mad raving of a child. All we have to do is play dumb, and everything will go back to normal. There is no proof of what we did. Another man stood up from his seat, his hair balding up top over the years. Madam President is right. We may have to be careful with prying eyes for a while, but as long as we don't give anything away, we are in the clear. Cowardly words of confirmations were spoken throughout the darkly lightened room, like parrots repeating after each other. The double door to the room swung open, a panting man running into the room, not bothering to reclose the door. Light peeked into the room through partly open doors, illuminating parts of the room in light. Madam President, we have a problem, he shouted through his panting lips, his arm waving a phone to and fro. Everyone looked back at him with startled expressions. We have a mole. I don't know how, but the top secret file of Lady NagaBT has been leaked onto the internet. We have a team of people trying to take it down, but it's being shared faster. Then we can take it down. They know, Madam President. They know. The crowd cheered as the preliminary to the event was set to begin. Everyone gathered in a long tunnel leading out into the stadium. The shouts of students can be heard as they shoved and jeered at each other. Words of pride were shouted amongst them as they towed the starting line. Looking back, Jiru noticed Tsutsumi standing in the far back of the tunnel, looking lost in thought. She wanted to reach out for him, but everything he said was still bouncing around in her mind, creating an invisible wall between them. She wouldn't even know what to say to him right now. That was a lot to hear all at once. It's no wonder he seems so angry right now. Feeling Momo nudge her with her elbow, Jiru met her eyes before sighing and following after her. Momo didn't need to say anything, but she knew that she was right. Leave him be for now. On your marks, everyone. Midnight screamed over the bustle. Everyone crouched down into sprinting stances, some more trained than others. Get set. She raised her whip into the air. The chaos died down as everyone posed ready to strike. Bringing the whip down, she screamed. Go. Everyone started running all at once. Contestants pushing and shoving as they rushed to the end of the tunnel. But throughout the chaos of the beginning sprint, there was one person who had yet to move. Izuku Tsutsumi hummed as he bobbed his head before shaking it and pressing a button on his headphone, switching songs. A camera trained on him the entire time as he absently switched songs, his finger hovering over the button before stopping. He found something he liked. Closing his eyes, his foot tapped to a beat that no one else could hear, slowly bobbing to it as people watched on. They had expected to see something, but not this. Some watched on amused, while others were more on the confused side. Way up above, long red feathered wings swished from side to side as a pro hero watched. His yellow visor was zoomed in and watching it all and letting out a chuckle. Tapping his gloved fingers to his phone, he sat on a rooftop. Raising a canned drink to his lips, he took a swig before setting the can back down. Go on, fly little bird. Fly higher than I ever did. With startling speed, Izuku crouched down into a sprinter stance before taking off. Soaring like a missile through the air, he flipped, landing on nothing before taking off again. A purple pinball missile soaring past everyone in a blink of an eye. Up ahead, Todoroki made it to the entrance, frost coating his arm as he turned, preparing to unleash a blast of cold before flinching as Izuku zipped past. The time slowing for a second as they stared at each other. A startled look on Todoroki's face at the sheer speed of his classmate. He hadn't shown off anything like that before. Sure, he was fast and extremely aerial, but never to this degree. Todoroki blinked, and he was gone. It looks like Tsutsumi is the first one to leave the tunnel. He's heading for the first obstacle, the robot inferno. Snapping out of his daze, Todoroki cursed as he ran after Tsutsumi. He didn't even have time to freeze the entrance like he planned. Flipping past some missiles, Izuku ignored the attacking robots. Bouncing from robot to robot, he launched into the air and towards the zero-pointer from the exam. Landing on its shoulder, he launched up again, soaring past everything before jumping down and tucking and rolling on the ground. And down goes the zero-pointer thanks to Yaoyorozu from 1A. Tsutsumi is soaring past all of the competition, but Todoroki and Bakugo are on his tail. Who will win? Not dwelling on it for long, Izuku ran far ahead, running straight at the large gap in the ground before leaping, landing on nothing with a roll. The crowd went crazy as he ignored the pit entirely, just to ignore the mines as well. Feet running along the mines, they didn't go off. A small air wall separating him from the sensors as he ran. Launching into the air, he dipped, turning into a spin before landing right next to Midnight at the podium. The crowd roared, everyone standing and applauding him as he panted, running the back of a hand along his forehead. In a complete upset, Izuku Tsutsumi beat the first event in a landslide. Did that just beat the world record for the relay race? Handing him a bottle of water, Midnight smiled gentle at him, giving him a nod. Congrats, Tsutsumi. Your mother would be proud. Blinking tears from his eyes, he smiled as he took the water bottle from her. Thank you. I can't wait to see her again one day. In a dark, run-down bar, a man sat on a stool. His hair was ratty and his skin was flaking. Raising a hand, he scratched at his neck as he watched the complete waste of a time the world liked to call an event. What a joke. Just a bunch of gifted people living their happy little lives. Why his master insisted he watch this show, he'll never know. It's just a bunch of spoiled brats patting each other on the back and singing their own praises. The TV stayed trained right on the brat that got in his way at the Usj. He'd recognize that obnoxious hair anywhere. A low, deep voice echoed through the TV next to him, making him turn to face it. Well, well, well. There's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Kaine Tsutsumi. You know her, master? Not exactly. More like I know of her. He let out a deep laugh from the TV before pausing in thought. Let's see if we can help them. After all, who am I to get in between a woman and her child? Ending notes. What's this? A punk rock story about tearing down the establishment and making it better for everyone. From me? Never. In all seriousness, am I the only one that thinks it's crazy that Lady Nagant was groomed to kill for a body of government before being tossed aside when they were done with her? And it's never brought up again. Like, that's insane. Also, I know that Lady Nagant's second quirk, Airwalk, was given to her by All for One later on, but SHHHH, let my boy do his backflips. Midoriya, are you even listening to me? Blinking a few times, Izuku Midoriya sat on the train, a slow rhythmic motion bouncing the seats as they went. He was older, dressed in his high school's black uniform. Normally buttoned up, his was opened, a white t-shirt peeking from underneath. With rolled-up sleeves, there were thick arms, faint scars tracing them. Thick curly green hair up top, and a buzzed undercut beneath. Looking out the window of the train, he watched the skyline of buildings zip past. A moving horizon where the sky had just started to change color to a beautiful blue. The morning sun shone against his face. Looking back at the source of the voice, he stared at his best friend Itsuka Kendo. She was wearing a different school uniform, her orange hair tied up into a long ponytail swaying lightly in the wind. Her arms were crossed as she lightly tapped her foot. Whatever he missed made her angry. Better fix it. Yes, I was drinking in every word you said. Raising an eyebrow at him, she continued to frown, her hands going to her sides. Oh, really? What was I saying then? Okay, if he was honest, he wasn't listening at all. He was too busy thinking about stuff. Shrugging, he let out a sigh as he ran a hand through his curly mat of green hair. You were talking about how awesome you are, and to tell me to eat my veggies. Wincing, he felt her fist hit his shoulder. Not super hard, but enough to hurt. Like I need to tell you that I'm the coolest person you know. Jabbing a thumb at herself, she smiled before thinking for a second. Her eyebrows raised in thought before looking back at him. Okay, fine, I'll just ask. What's wrong? What makes you think something is wrong? Letting out a scoff, she rolled her eyes before gesturing to him. Because it's you. You may pretend to be all tough and strong now, but you forget, I grew up with you. I know you're still that stuttering, anxious cry-baby deep down. Okay, ouch. That was a little harsh. Even if it's true. He could never completely fool her, huh? No matter how much he tried to play it off, she always worried about him. That's just the kind of person Kendo is. Sighing, he sagged a little in his seat before gesturing out with his hands. All right, fine. I'm feeling nervous, happy now. Always. It honestly feels great to be the one that constantly wins. You should try it sometime. Huffing, he waved her away with his arm before turning to stare out the window again, watching the city fly by. He remembered it like it was yesterday. The bullying from Kachin and his lackeys. Finally coming clean to his mom. Her suing Aldera for not only failing to intervene, but also in some cases even doing it themselves. The big juicy settlement. Him transferring districts and being flung into a new school just to still get bullied. Only this time it was less physical stuff and more being the bottom of the food chain with no friends. Signing up for karate classes and meeting Kendo. Who would have guessed it led to being here? Taking a train to UA for their entrance exam with his best friend. How time flies. Snapping out of his thought process, he felt Kendo pat his shoulder, slowly turning to look at her. Don't sweat it too much, big guy, she said in a more gentle tone. We've trained forever for this. All we can do now is go out there and kick ass. He smiled a little at that. Yeah, you're always right. I know. She smiled back at him, raising her closed fist out to him. Now, what do you say, rivals? Returning the smile, he leaned forward, tapping her fist with his own. Rivals. The rest of the train ride to UA was pretty peaceful, all things considered. Him and Kendo quizzed each other on a few topics for the written part of the test. The train lurching to a stop. Stepping off of the train, he looked up at the massive campus. The main building, a sheer monolith practically blocking out the sun. He remembered reading once that the main building of UA consisting of 4 long towers with bridges connecting the 4 of them together in the shape of a giant H. The rest of the campus consisted of smaller buildings scattered all around that were mostly used for separate classes and dorms. A long high wall stretching completely around the campus like the gate to a castle. From what he heard, the protection system was one of the finest in the world. He had seen what UA looked like on TV since he was a child, but even then he had no idea how big it was. Pictures simply do not do it justice. He couldn't even imagine how much money something like this would cost. The place was already packed full of people, groups of young adults from all walks of life, talking amongst themselves and wandering about. So many people, and only a few actually allowed into the hero course. Feeling Kendo brush her shoulder against him, she kept walking, disappearing into the crowd of people. Yes, she has the right idea. No point in psyching himself out. With a shake of his head and a slap to his cheeks, he followed after her. Walking past some people and further onto the campus. Scanning the crowd of people, he followed after her. Kendo's bright orange hair sticking out like a sore thumb in the crowd. A plus to being on the taller side. Muttering excuse mess as he went, he waded into the crowd, trying to be as polite as he could as he walked past. As he wandered past, he was unaware of a group of eyes watching him, a handful of girls stopping their conversation to stare. The group of punk rock girls wore all black and stuck out like a sore thumb against the wave of people wearing school uniforms. The tallest of the 4 girls having black cat-like ears and a tail, the tail swishing softly behind her. Her voice was like a gentle purr as she leaned against the wall to get a closer look. Oh my, is that Midoriya? Looking him up and down as he passed, she couldn't help but giggle. I know, right, exclaimed another, her short bright blue hair constantly moving like it was in the wind. Looking his way, she sighed, exasperated, before flopping down next to Kyoka Jiru in her seat. I tried to flirt with him a few days ago, and all he said was sorry. I don't spend time with bullies, but he didn't look like that before. It's not fair. The last of their group, a tan blonde-haired woman with heavy eyeshadow, looked his way as well before lightly elbowing Kyoka's side. Kyo girl, you used to be his friend before hanging out with us. Be a gal pal and put a good word in. I'm sure he misses you. Looking over Midoriya's disappearing frame, she felt a wave of sadness come over her before shaking her head. Getting up from her spot, she started to head farther into the campus. Sorry girls, I'm pretty sure I'm in the same boat as the rest of you. The sounds of disappointed boos from her girlfriends could be heard behind her as they followed after. Unable to see the depressed look in Kyoka's eyes. The written part of the test wasn't too bad, honestly. He was feeling anxious before the test, and he had hit some snags here or there, but overall the questions weren't terrible. He had been good at math his entire life, and science was a memory thing more than anything. He was so excited to see that Ectoplasm was holding the test. This year he was half tempted to ask for an autograph, but he decided against it. Punching forward, his uniform swished with a rippling sound, his left arm going back before punching forward again. After the test, his anxiety started to come back again. It didn't help that the bus ride down to the designated test zone felt like an eternity. Punching forward, he held his fighting stance, each punch attempting to knock his anxieties away. It was something he learned at the Kendo's dojo. Doing katas helped him resurface himself, be more calm under high stress. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes before standing up straight again. Slow, deep breaths. Think about the situation strategically and don't dwell on the what ifs. Fighting robots. Their test was to fight robots. He was unsure how well he would do against big chunks of metal. It's not like his quirk can help him in a fight. Opening his hand, he stared down at it, the rough calluses staring back at him. How was he supposed to tear apart robots with his bare hands? Frowning, he felt the anxiety start to come back in full force. This was crazy. Deep down, he knew he couldn't do this. Maybe he could sneak away and just lie saying he got lost or something. The flash of a memory came to him. Kendo was younger, her face bruised and her clothes dirty. Smiling big at him, he saw that she was missing a tooth. With shaking knees, she stood up, raising her bleeding hand out to him curled into a fist. We may not be impressive now, but one day if we push each other, we can be the best in the world. What do you say, rivals? Clenching his fist hard, he frowned, a spark of green fire flashing from his mouth. No, he wasn't going to just give up. What was he doing? He was a Midoriya, damn it. There are two things Midoriyas are known for, and that is crying way too much and never giving up. He thought of his mom. His sensei, Kendo. Marching forward to the line painted on the ground, he unbuttoned his uniform. The two ends billowing in the wind as he punched his hand. Not only is his mom cheering him on, but he made a promise to Kendo. He had something to fight for. Time to prove everyone wrong. Present Mike's voice could be heard defending the tense silence. And begin. Rolling backwards against the blow, he clutched at his chest before sidestepping a second strike. Raising his fist, it collided with cold, harsh metal, his teeth gritting from the punch. Reeling back, he hit it again, the metal bending under his fist, this time before caving in. The massive robot collapsing into a pile of scraps before him. Panting, he looked down at his bleeding knuckles. That was only the fifth robot. He could hear numbers being shouted all around him, and they were way bigger than that. This wasn't working. He didn't seem to have time to process that information before another, much bigger three-pointer, came out of an alleyway rushing him. Knocked backwards, he tumbled into a trash can, sitting up with a curse. What the hell? That really hurt. Who the hell programmed these things to be so ruthless? Rolling out of the way of its incoming blow, he stepped up the side of the wall, leaping onto its back and wrapping his arms around its neck. It flailed around frantically in a vain attempt to throw him off, his fist colliding against the back of its head over and over. After the fourth hit, the metal bent, twisting and distorting until breaking under the force. The robot toppling over and turning off. Letting out a harsh cough, Izuku Midoriya slowly crawled off of the robot, rolling his shoulder before wincing. That little stunt really messed up his shoulder. Great. Leaning against the wall for support, he walked down the alleyway. Following the sounds of destruction, he wandered into the street, his hand holding his injured shoulder. There he could see a bunch of other examines destroying robots like they were nothing. God. He was an idiot for thinking he could pull this off, wasn't he? Of course, the most sought-after school in the country was going to weed out the weak ones. He wondered what it was like to be born with such a power. Being able to blow away a robot with a laser, or be able to run fast and kick a robot in half. Watching these two fight off robots, he couldn't help but let out a harsh laugh. He wondered what Kendo would say right now if she saw how pathetic he looked. Boom. The ground shook beneath him, his legs shaking in a vain attempt to stay up before falling to his knees. Gazing around, he saw that everyone else was doing the same, a panicked look in their eyes as they tried to figure out what was going on. What was that loud bang? Almost like it was answering his question, the ground shook again. The bang getting louder and louder as it got closer. Placing his hand on a nearby wall, he pulled himself to his feet, leaning against the wall for support. Turning the corner, he saw it. His gaze starting at the wheel before looking up and up and up again. A massive behemoth of a robot, its lumbering frame crushing a street as it went. The concrete cracking under the sheer weight of the thing. Smoke of destroyed debris covered the area as it raised a massive fist, and punched a hole in a building. The ground shook, the building falling apart under its own weight. What the hell? Izuku's heart skipped a beat at the sight. The thing was massive, as big as a building. Staring up at it, people ran past him, attempting to get as far away from it as possible. Others seemed to dive down alleyways in a frantic move for more points. What the hell was he doing? This was insane. There's no way that he could do anything against something like that. Watching it in awed terror, it turned a corner before destroying a second building. It started to head down a street, not even seeming to care about the ant-sized people taking the test. Turning to run from the monstrous machine, he saw her. A brunette woman face down on the street, with a massive slab of rock on top of her. She didn't even make a sound. She just laid there unconscious, a small pool of red forming around her head. He froze, his eyes unable to leave her unmoving body. Time could have stopped for a solid minute, and he wouldn't have noticed. Chaos erupted around him, all of the sound drowning out. The machine was heading in her direction. Maybe it didn't see her, or maybe it just didn't care. His heart raced at the sight, his good arm clenching. He only really noticed he was walking towards it when a person's shoulder checked him running past. What the hell was he doing? Making a mad dash into the fray, he stumbled into the smoke. Sliding to a halt at the unconscious girl, he bent down, gripping under the large slab of rock. Closing his eyes, his muscles tensed under the strain, his bad shoulder flaring up from the exertion. Letting it go, he groaned, his hand rubbing at her bad shoulder. Shit, again. Trying to lift it a second time seemed to do just as little. He was too hurt right now. Not strong enough. Turning to look around, he frantically looked for someone to help. His green eyes stopping at a blue-haired man with glasses. The same guy he saw from before. The man was just staring. He was obviously shell-shocked. His eyes hazed and wide. "Don't just stand there. Help me lift this," Izuku screamed at him, panic in his voice. That seemed to snap him out of it. The man shook his head before looking over at him, nodding. His voice was loud as he weirdly enough saluted him. "All right." Running towards him, he settled next to Izuku, his hands going under the other side. The zero-pointer was way too close for his liking. The ground rattled as it got closer and closer. With a third heave, he felt the rock move, if only a little. Yes, common, almost there. Screaming under the pain, he tried a fourth time, pain rocketing through his shoulder. The shadow towering over them stretched as it got closer, encompassing them in an overcast of dread. So this was it, huh? Dying under a giant robot trying to save a girl. Honestly, he could think of worse ways to go out. Maybe life really does flash before your eyes right before you die. Or maybe one of those blows gave him a concussion. But he thought about the past again. Bakugo and his friends holding him down as they kicked him, laughing as they didn't even bother with their quirks. A guidance counselor giving him that look when he said he wanted to be a hero. The teacher shaking his head before sliding him a job pamphlet for being a nurse. The angry tear-covered eyes of Kyoka as she spun around to glare at him. A group of girls watching them with amused looks on their faces. "Will you please just leave me alone, Midoriya? For once I can finally fit in somewhere. We were never friends, okay? I used you." He channeled all of that anger, all of that pain, and he screamed, his knees buckling as he strained to lift it, tears prickling at his eyes. If this really was the end, he was going to go out the same way he came in, kicking and screaming. God damn it. He really thought that was the end for him, dying surrounded by strangers trying to do something everyone told him he couldn't. Closing his eyes, he accepted his fate. The sound of footsteps running not away but towards them. Snapping his eyes open, he turned just in time to watch a red-haired man run past. Red lightning covered his body as he knelt down and leapt into the air, soaring past him at an insane speed before reeling a fist back and destroying the zero-pointer with a single punch. Chunks of robot fell around them as the zero-pointer toppled backwards with an earth-shaking bang. Watching the red-haired man, he fell from the sky and collapsed in the horizon. Oh God, he hoped he was okay. Over the intercoms, a buzzer went off. Guess that's it for the test. Turning in time, he watched a third guy with crazy purple hair run up. His tired eyes stared at him before leaning down and helping them lift. With a third person, they were finally able to get the rock off of her, sliding her out into the open. Izuku immediately checked her palm for a pulse, relieved to find that she still had one. It was there, just really faint. Channeling the medic classes he took a year ago, he checked her over. It looks like she, for the most part, has a messed up ankle, hip, and the back of her head is split open. Is she dead? Grumbled the purple man, his eyes looking her over. Bite your tongue. There is no way such a prestigious school, such as UA, would allow someone to die on their grounds. We need to get her to a hospital tent. I saw them on the way in. They should surely help us. Bellowed the glasses guy. I don't know. We did sign waivers on the way in. Tuning their argument out, he sighed. The faded sound of their voices bickering behind him. Looking down at his hand, he closed his eyes, pausing for a second before opening them again. A green flame sparking across it before covering his hand. Not turning around, he reached his hand forward as he spoke. There's no need, I've got it. Izuku Midoriya was unaware of the wide-eyed stares they gave him as he ran his burning hand over her ankle, taking a deep breath. Sliding his hand farther up, his flaming fingers danced along her hip, caressing it for a second before moving up again. Sitting her up slowly, he leaned in close, his hand going over the injury at the back of her head. One deep breath in, he pulled the hand away, revealing the injury completely healed. Ochako Uraraka's eyes slowly opened, her hazy mind immediately thinking of one thing. Everything hurt. Blinking a few times, her vision started to come back to her. The first thing she saw was a man. He was about her age, with green hair and eyes. The sun was shining against the back of his body, giving him an otherworldly golden glow. She also thought she saw cute freckles on his face, but it was hard to tell right now. Did she die? Coughing a few times, she attempted to speak, her mouth opening to weakly ask, Are you an angel? The angel stared at her confused for a second before letting out a soft laugh. His laugh was so nice, she couldn't help but let out a weak giggle as well. Shaking his head, his green hair swayed, bobbing with emotion. Setting her back down on the ground, he smiled gentle down at her. If she truly wasn't dead, she wanted to know his name. No, sorry, you're not dead just yet. Just be careful when first standing up. You're going to be out of it for a bit. Walking is going to feel weird. Getting back up to his feet, he turned to two other people, talking to them. She should be okay now, but can you watch her? I'm going to make sure no one else is seriously hurt. After they nodded at him, her angel stood back up and started to walk away. No, wait, please come back. Tell me your name. She tried to speak, but nothing came out, her mouth hanging open, desperate to call out to him. Wait, come back. Do you like matcha? We can go get matcha. His green curly hair stood out amongst most people as he walked out of sight. Whoever he was, she hoped he got in so she could thank him properly. Her eyes slowly closed as she suddenly felt really tired. She dreamed of green hair, freckles, and kind eyes. Heading towards where he saw him last, he limped a little as he went. Coughing black smoke came from his mouth as he looked around. It didn't help that the pain of the girl's ankle and hip was added onto his messed up shoulder. He's surprised he can even walk around right now. Common. Where did you go, mystery man? Looking over the wreckage, he found him. The red-haired man was laying on his back, slowly sitting up to rub at his hand. Oh good, he's okay. Waddling over to him, he called out, hoping not to spook him. Hey, you okay over there? Standing up, the mysterious man looked over to him and smiled, waving his hand. Hey dude, yeah, I'm okay. Sure enough, the guy looked basically okay. His hand was covered in a type of armor that was broken and flaking off, but injury-wise, he looked okay. That's good. You saved us back there, and I don't know what I would have done if you weren't okay. Yeah, man. I saw that manly display back there, and I just had to help. You were super cool, dude. Blinking a few times, he tilted his head a little. Manly. Dude. Oh my god. He's a himbo. Smiling, he reached his hand out to him. Izuku Midoriya. The red-haired man smiled wide with rows of shark-like teeth before taking his hand and shaking it. Ijiro Kirishima. Chuckling, he returned the smile. Glad it was all over. A pulse of pain went through him, making him groan. No, never mind. It's not all over. He was in so much pain. He also took that woman's pain as well. Swaying a little, he fell back onto the ground, staring up at the sky. He was so tired his eyes were already starting to close. Through his blurry vision, he could see Kirishima screaming questions at him. He was clearly worried for him. He seemed like a nice guy, even though his power seemed bullshit. Sitting up quickly, he winced. Everything hurt. A smell of antiseptic hit his nose, making him cringe. He always hated the hospital. Before he could even say anything, a cane smacked against his head, knocking him back onto the bed. Stop moving around. How am I supposed to check on you wiggling around like that? Maybe don't hit me and I won't wiggle around. Maybe don't wiggle around and I won't hit you. Rubbing his head, he sighed, staring at the room for a second. He's still in Yua, turning to stare at the source of the voice. He stared at none other than recovering girl. A surly old woman that was known for two things: having a wonderful healing quirk, and for having no bedside manner at all. An infamous hero, both renowned for her deeds, but feared on how she does them. Coughing into his hand, his voice was raw when he spoke. How long have I been out? When he turned back to look at her, she was busy writing something down on a clipboard, not even looking at him. About 4 hours. I tried to heal you earlier, but you were so tired my quirk would have done more harm than good. Wait, what? Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone, staring at multiple unread messages. Most of them were from Kendo. Sighing, he collapsed back into the bed. Just great. He made her worry again. The ceiling fan slowly spun around in circles. It says here that your quirk allows you to heal people by taking their pain. Why in the world would you use that on a girl that was on death's door? We have medics on standby. Recovery girl huffed angrily at him as she looked over her tools, her back turned to him as she ranted. Young people these days with their love of self-sacrifice. Her words made him frown more up at the ceiling. Why did he do that? He probably threw his chance at Yua away by being stupid. Running a hand through his green hair, he let out a long sigh. I don't know. I guess I just thought. If I can't save a single girl, what's the point of all of this? Recovery girl's motions stopped, her hand hovering over some medical supplies before turning to face him again. Her voice sounded more gentle this time, like he said the magic word or something. Well then, that's an interesting answer, Mr. Midoriya. Tell me more about yourself. I might have an offer for you. Walking through the halls of Yua, Izuku Midoriya was dressed in his general studies uniform. Turning a corner, he made a frustrated sound as he found another dead end. What the hell was with this place? It was like a maze. He just wanted to find orientation. Making another turn, he opened a door to find himself outside, an area covered with trees and grass. His shoes crunched against the grass as he looked around. Was he outside right now, or was this an indoor thing? An explosion echoed through the air. A faint glow in the distance. Walking closer to the site, he yelped as a singed ball landed at his feet, making him jump back. Bending down, he picked it up, his thumb running against it as he turned it in his hand. He knows these burn marks. Hoping up, he climbed up a tree, sitting on one of the branches. Staring out, he saw a bunch of students standing in an outside gym. They looked like they were doing drills. That's weird. Didn't they have orientation? Flipping out his notebook, he started to write. Interesting. There were so many crazy quirks in this class. He started to write them down one at a time. As he wrote them down, he recognized a handful of them. He didn't know their names, but he saw the blue-haired boy and the brunette from before. They both looked to be doing well, a lot healthier than last he saw them. There were also the people he did recognize, Bakugo and Kyoka. Frowning a little at the sight of them, he ripped out their pages and tossed them aside. The less he knew about them, the better. He was so busy writing down their quirks, he hardly even noticed the long-haired man standing under the tree. Hearing him cough below, Midoriya gasped, falling out of the tree with a thud. Why is he always the one who got hurt? Looking over, he saw the long-haired man with the scarf looking over his notes with a frown. He watched horrified as the man raised a hand and turned the page before reading more. Quickly standing back up, he wrenched his notes from the man's hands. When the tired man looked at him without saying a word, he felt the need to immediately apologize. Sorry. It's just a little embarrassing for people to read my stuff. He still hadn't said anything, simply looking him over with his cold eyes like he was judging him. Midoriya, there you are. The door swung open, and in walked Recovery Girl with her cane. Your class has been looking for you. Looking towards the tired man, she huffed, shaking her head at him. Eraserhead, don't tell me you've been bothering the students. For the first time, Eraserhead said something, shaking his head before giving Recovery Girl a small smirk. I have not. I found this student spying on my class. That's not what happened, I cried, trying to defend myself. Wincing, Izuku felt his knee being smacked by Recovery Girl, ushering him out the door. No back talk, mister. Go back to class. Soon they were alone, silently watching the door that he just left out of. The first to speak was Eraserhead, not looking towards Recovery Girl as he spoke. So, that's the kid. Letting out a laugh, she smiled more. Yes, that is the kid. What did you think of him? He's smart based off of what I read. He managed to figure out most of my students' quirks just by watching them from a distance. Pausing for a second, he tilted his head in thought before turning to look at her. What is your plan here, Shuzenji? Oh, what makes you think I have a plan? You know what I mean. You've never stuck your neck out for a student before, why now? Turning, she stared at the tree line in thought, her cane lightly tapping the ground. You know as well as I do that the entrance exam is bullshit. Half the reason that hero culture has turned out the way it did was because of the obsession that the HPSC has with power. Too many people obsessed with power and status over heart. The boy desperately wants to save as many people as he can. He has a good head on his shoulders. Facing Eraserhead, she looked him over, their eyes meeting to have a separate conversation. I've been talking with Principal Nezu. I want to create a program that helps children that slip through the cracks. A way to help children catch up and be the best heroes they can. They already have the rule at Sports Festival. He can simply train and do well then to get in. The Sports Festival is months away. That's months of the hero course taking specialized classes, while the general study students only take gym. The gap will only get wider. With this program, we can ease promising students into the hero course. Turning away, she watched the trees move in the wind. Here's the deal. You and I will pick potential candidates and train them after school. Think of it as an extra class. If our picks do well during the festival, we can show the HPSC results, opening the door for many more potential heroes. Giving her a nod, Eraserhead went for the door, stopping in the doorway before turning to look at her one last time. I'll think on it.